But I think we do have a moment here. See people, I think, from all different walks of life, and from elected officials to government agencies and bureaucrats and grassroots folks and even business people are all saying, we must begin to attack this problem at its roots and at its core, and that we just can't primarily continue to arrest young people, but we've got to begin to try and prevent them from getting involved in gangs and then actually intervene in their lives if they are in gangs. For the kids who want a way out, we need to provide that kind of safety net. So I think in some cases there are some neighborhoods where the problem is more acute than others, and some of those are the areas we've really targeted our strategy around. But I think, any place where there is violence that is in really at epidemic proportions, and kids are losing their lives, we ought to be concerned about that as citizens.
Of course, during the special meeting, as you know, a lot was said about prevention, intervention, reentry, and I think the fourth leg of that is suppression. Most of us understand prevention and intervention, but what is reentry? How important is it that all of these tools be used together?
Well, reentry is really talking about young people who have been incarcerated. And so if you think about the amount of money that we spend to arrest young people, to then adjudicate them or prosecute them, then we incarcerate them, and once they've served their time, then we actually put them on probation or parole and supervise them. The bad news is that 70%, upwards of 70% of those young people actually end up reoffending, and they get back on that same cycle that I just described. And the cost to taxpayers is in the billions in dollars, and it's really an enormous burden to government. And I think what we're really looking at in reentry is how can we ensure when young people come out of being incarcerated, how can we try and create the kind of safety net for young people so that when they get out, they can actually move to a more positive future rather than getting sucked right back into the same negative and criminal activity they were involved in before. So I think creating the kind of systems and the connections between the probation departments, child welfare system, between local communities, the public schools, and knitting that together to create that network and that web of safety is a really important part.
Reverend Carr, during many of the council meetings of the past, they've discussed how many different prevention programs that are currently operating in Los Angeles. Do you know how many there are? Is it going to be part of your job to coordinate all of these programs so that maybe one hand knows what the other's doing?
Well, that's certainly that is going to be a part of our job, I think, is to try and be kind of a central address for what the city is doing. But I mean, the truth of the matter is there are hundreds of prevention programs. Many of them funded through the city, but many of them don't get any city funding, but are important assets that exist in each community. So I think what we're going to try and do is, as part of our assessment, for each one of the gang reduction zones, the 7 or 8 target areas that we're starting with, we're actually in the process right now of launching a resource mapping and a needs assessment to determine what already exists there. And that's both government-funded and government-run programs as well as non-government-run programs, so that we can create the kind of maps that will then allow us to really micro-target the additional $500,000 to $600,000 that we're going to put into those areas to ensure that we're leveraging what's already happening on the ground.
Speaking of which, we saw a few minutes ago in this program that there's different programs being used in different areas of the city, different council districts. Anything stand out with you so far as things that have been particularly effective?
Well, I think there's lots of good programs out there, and I guess that's one thing that I would want to say is that, I think there are a lot of folks who are in the trenches who were doing the kinds of things I did for 17 years, who are rooted in neighborhoods, who every day are putting their lives on the line for kids and families, and they're providing young people a place to go that's safe after school. And there's a lot of good that's going on. I think the challenge is there's not enough of that. We actually need more, and we need additional resources to do even more so that we can ensure that every kid who wants to choose a positive and productive future actually has the kind of network that they can do that and become successful. So I think there's lots of good stuff going on there, and sometimes we're a little too pessimistic about what the possibilities for the future are.
Well, to pick one to talk about for a second, it was mentioned by several council members, the CLEAR program, Community Law Enforcement and Recovery Program. Councilman Reyes, for example, talked about it. How does CLEAR help suppress gang activity?
Well, CLEAR is really a coordinated law enforcement approach. It's a partnership between the mayor's office, the LAPD, the sheriff's department, the city attorney, the district attorney, and probation and parole. And what it really does is get all the different parts of the law enforcement community to begin to work together in a targeted area and focus their attention and efforts on gangs. So, for example, on the prosecution side, in a typical case, those cases might be passed within the district or city attorney's office from the time somebody is filed on until they actually get prosecuted. It might go through 3 or 4 different attorneys' hands. Well, in the CLEAR program, actually one attorney will follow that all the way through and do what's called vertical prosecution. But it also gets law enforcement talking to one another. Probation officers are riding with LAPD officers in some of these communities, and so it's a very coordinated approach on the suppression side.
A minute ago, I think you mentioned within the mayor's gang reduction strategy 6 or 7, I believe it was, target communities. What are those communities, and what specifically will happen there?
Well, there's in the northeast Cypress Park area, we'll have a new gang reduction zone. In the Hollenbeck-Ramona Gardens area, we already have a project in the Hollenbeck-Boyle Heights area. We'll be adding a new site in the Newton area, one in the 77th Division area, one in the southwest Baldwin Village part of the city, and then out in the Northeast Valley in Pacoima Foothill. And in each one of those areas, we'll have a clear, they'll have a clear site, as we just talked about what that is on the law enforcement. And then we'll be hiring, and we've hired most of them already, program managers for each one of those target areas. And we'll be doing these needs assessment, resource mapping exercises, and then over the course of the next number of months, we'll be issuing an RFP to request for proposal to get out $500,000 to $600,000 additional dollars for prevention, intervention, and reentry, and then to begin to connect the dots through my program managers of all the various city resources, so we start to build a cohesive sense of effort around these targeted areas and see if we can get reductions.
Of course, there are a number of gang enforcement initiatives included in that very thick document that is the mayor's strategy. Can you explain what some of those other initiatives are for our viewers?
Well, on the suppression side, I'm actually not responsible for the suppression side. That's really done by LAPD. But, this last year they launched the South Bureau Criminal Gang Homicide Group, which was a number, 120 of the department's most experienced gang detectives in the city, and they're really focusing on gang-related murders to try and get to the bottom of those cases and clear them, as they say. And it's working with lots of different jurisdictions, including federal efforts. They also appointed designated an LAPD gang coordinator, who's Deputy Chief Gary Brennan, and then also on the suppression side, they had the 10 most wanted gang members and really targeted some of the high-profile gangs. So there's been a number of things on the suppression side, but and that was really done at the beginning of the year, and I'm really focusing more on the prevention, intervention, and reentry.
Okay, fair enough. The day after you appeared before City Council this past week, the mayor sent a note around to department heads in the city saying that they had to all do their part to make up a $75 million shortfall, including, it looks like, the city attorney's gang prosecution unit and perhaps some other gang programs. This obviously must be of some concern to you.
Well, yeah, I think obviously we're in a tough time financially with the economy slowing down, and particularly the housing crisis that's going on around the nation, and given the fact that here in California, local government in particular relies so much on, property taxes and the transfer taxes and things like that, we're in a tough situation. And then there's the governor and the legislature struggles with what could be a $10 to $14 billion deficit, as they're talking about there. Times are going to be tough. I think it's why it's going to be really important for us to look at the dollars the city is already spending, which we're in the process of doing, to determine how we could spend those in a more strategic and a smarter way. And we will probably make some recommendations in next year's budget about how to do that.
Before we let you go, we just have to ask you, what can Los Angelenos in general, the rest of us, do to help reduce gang and youth violence? Is anything?
I think it's getting involved. I think one of the challenges is people sort of live between being anesthetized and sort of blurry-eyed and glazed over and not really paying attention to the problem, or they're paralyzed by it because of either fear and because of the violence they're experiencing in their own community. And I think we need to move as many citizens as we possibly can into a place in between those two, feelings where people actually become engaged. And that could be becoming involved in a mentoring program or becoming a volunteer in an after-school program, in community beautification efforts in their own neighborhoods to send a message to, criminal elements that we're watching, that we're not willing to let our neighborhood go into decline because of this kind of youth violence, and just to become involved and not just to sit back and throw up your hands and say, there's really nothing that we can do as citizens here in L.A.
Well, Director of the Mayor's Office on Gang Reduction and Youth Development, Reverend Jeff Carr, welcome back to Los Angeles, and thanks for joining us on Council Week in Review.
Thank you for having me.
And, of course, we wish Reverend Carr and all the city departments working to reduce gang violence much success. And if you'd like information on any of the gang reduction programs discussed, just dial 311, your one call to City Hall. And watch Council Week in Review for highlights of the week's council meetings and listen for item numbers associated with those discussions you have an interest in. Then go to the World Wide Web and listen to those discussions in their entirety using the new City of Los Angeles Video on Demand feature. Visit the city's website at lacity.org and follow the instructions on the screen. Now, if you have suggestions or comments about any of the programs you see here on Channel 35 or would like to receive a free viewer guide, call our viewer hotline at 213-473-3978. And remember, you can watch all Los Angeles City Council meetings live in their entirety on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays beginning at 10 a.m. On Sundays, you can watch the replay of all the week's meetings, also beginning at 10 a.m. Well, that concludes our program for the week ending November 30th, 2007. On behalf of Dave Brown and everyone here at Channel 35, I'm Jack Popejoy. Thank you for watching, and please join us for the next Council Week in Review.
Hey, buddy! You with the stupid hat! Come here. Closer. No parking! Do you know what happens when you park illegally on these narrow hillside streets? You block the street so emergency vehicles can't pass. Each year, homes are destroyed and lives are lost because of drivers like you who park illegally! And you know what else? You can get a citation! And you can be towed!
Help us get to the emergency. The life we save just might be yours.
How'd you know?
The ball called.
Hey, look out for the pothole.
It's time for the 12th annual LADWP Holiday Light Festival in Griffith Park from November 26th through December 30th from 5 to 10 p.m. Vehicles can enter at Los Feliz Boulevard. Walkers may park at the LA Zoo parking lot. Shuttle service is available from the LA Zoo parking lot on weekends and December 14th through the 30th. For more information, go to www.dwplightfestival.com or www.ladwp.com. Happy holidays from the LADWP.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council meeting for Tuesday, December 4th, 2007. We are here in the John Ferraro Council Chambers in room 340 of City Hall. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., except for the first Friday of each month in which we meet in Van Nuys City Hall in our efforts to bring City Hall closer to all Angelenos. We invite members of the public to join us here at our council meetings at 10 a.m. We're also broadcast live on our city's channel, LA City View, channel 35, and rebroadcast each evening. We are simultaneously simulcast on the web through the city's homepage at lacity.org, and we also have archived footage of all of our past council meetings online at lacity.org as well. Finally, you can always use your telephone to listen in to these council meetings by calling Council Phone, a service of the Information Technology Agency. The number that which you call to listen in is 213-621-CITY. That's 213-621-CITY. And you can listen not only to the full council meetings, but also any of our committee meetings as well. I'm Council President Eric Garcetti, and I'm joined by Councilmember Tony Cardenas, Councilmember Bernard Parks, Councilmember Bill Rosendahl, Councilmember Herb Wesson. We are awaiting 5 more council members to constitute a 2/3 or 10 members quorum of our body. Mr. Reyes is excused on city business today, but otherwise we expect each of the members to be here. Councilwoman Gruhl and Councilwoman Perry, as well as Councilmember Alarcon, are on their way down, I know, from the Energy and Environment Committee upstairs. We are still awaiting Councilwoman Hahn, Councilmember Huizar, Councilmember Labange, Councilmember Smith, and Councilmember Zine. Pursuant to council rules, all council members should be here at 10 a.m. Ready to begin business. So those council members are now late. If we can have council members Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Smith, Weiss, and Zine join us as soon as possible. Our agendas are available online 72 hours in advance of these meetings. For special agendas, they are available 24 hours in advance. They're available also in the city clerk's office or here live in person in these chambers or the Van Nuys City Hall chambers. All items on the agenda will receive a public hearing either in committee or here in council. If it's already received a public hearing in committee, it will be noticed as such, and it will require a reopening of the public hearing by the council to hear public comment. Items that have not yet received that public hearing are automatically triggered by any member of the public who wishes to be heard. If you would, please fill out a speaker card in the back, put the item number which you would like to be heard for, and please hand it to one of the sergeants at arms on either side of the aisles here at City Hall. If you're in Van Nuys, you can also testify via video conference facility, and just make sure you fill out the speaker card there and give it to the personnel, and we will hear your comments. Each member of the public is allowed to have 2 minutes of general public comment as well on items that are not on the agenda, but nevertheless are under our jurisdiction. Similarly, just fill out a speaker card and give that to one of the sergeants at arms. I want to thank again the council members who are here on time pursuant to council rules, Mr. Cardenas, Mr. Parks, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Wesson. I know that we have a couple council members at a press conference just outside. If we could ask them to please join us right away. We are still awaiting council members Alarcon, Gruhl, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Perry, Smith, Weiss, and Zine. Ms. Perry and Ms. Gruhl, as well as Mr. Alarcon, are upstairs in the Energy and Environment Committee. The rest of the City Council is expected to be here and is now late, so please, if our sergeants at arms can assist us in bringing those council members, and we will begin shortly. Thank you all for your patience. is our third quorum call for council members Alarcon, Gruel, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Perry, Smith, Weiss, and Zine. If the Sergeant at Arms can please release two of the council members at the Energy and Environment Committee and bring them down. We're still awaiting those members to join us. Mr. Alarcon, Ms. Gruel, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Labange. Ms. Perry is going to stay chairing the committee up there, but Mr. Smith, Mr. Weiss, and Mr. Zine are still expected. If we do not have a quorum in about 3 or 4 minutes, we will adjourn. Thank you. Mr.
President, how many committees are meeting at this time? Council committees? So there's one press conference going on that may involve council members, and there's also a committee that has 3 council members in it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We are now at 7 members, waiting 3 more. And Mr. Zine as well. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. We are now at 8 members, still awaiting Mr. Alarcon, Ms. Gruel, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Labange. Ms. Perry is still upstairs, and she will chair the meeting of the Energy and Environment Committee. For Mr. Weiss, we are still awaiting your presence as well. Thank you. This is a final quorum call. If we do not have council members here in 1 more minute, we will adjourn for lack of a quorum. Again, council member Alarcon, Gruel, Huizar, Labange, and Weiss, we are awaiting your presence in council chambers. We have only one item which is timely for today. If we fail to act on that, that will be Mr. Labange is here. We are awaiting one more member. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Gruel, Hahn, Huizar, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, we now have a quorum. If I could ask folks to please direct their attention to running through the agenda, but first order of business before that.
Approval of the minutes.
All right, Mr. Parks moves, Mr. Labange seconds. Without objection, those minutes will be approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Smith moves, Mr. Zine seconds. Without objection, those will be approved as well. Next order of business.
Mr. President, this is Tuesday, and there's a flag salute for today.
Okay. Ms. Gruel, would you be kind enough to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And if I could ask everybody to rise in council chambers for a salute to the flag.
I'd be proud to. Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. If I could ask everyone to please put the right hand over their heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gruel, run through the agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Ready? Begin it.
Before beginning the regular agenda, there has been a request to continue item 23 to January 30th, 2008.
Okay. Is there any objection, colleagues, on item 23 to continuing that until January, did you say 28th? I had 30th.
January 30th, 2008.
Sorry. Okay, 30th. Without objection, so ordered. Next items, please.
On the regular agenda, items 1 and 2 are street lighting district items, notice for public hearing. Council should have 12 members today. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Please, let's hold that till we have 12 members. Next order of business.
Item 3 is a 1911 act of Jessica Drive, item notice for public hearing. Council should close the hearing and confirm the assessment.
Okay. Is there any objection or anybody wishes to call that special? If not, let's go ahead and open the roll on that, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. Next items, please.
Items 4 through 22 are items for which public hearings have been held. Items 4 and 5 are confirmation of city officials. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Yes, please. Let's hold those on the desk.
And on item 22, a report has not yet been submitted. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
22 we will hold on the desk, and 8 we'll hold on the desk for 2 recusals as well. Other specials? Mr. Cardenas? Mr. Alarcon? Item 10? Until Friday. Item 10, that would be till December 7th. That's a Van Nuys meeting. Is that all right? Okay. We will be meeting in Van Nuys City Hall this Friday, and without objection, we'll continue to item 10 till this Friday, December 7th. Any other specials, colleagues? Mr. Parks?
7 until we get the committee report. Oh, no, I'm sorry. On 7, we continue it to tomorrow.
Okay. Is there any objection to continuing 7 until tomorrow? That would be December 5th?
Yes.
Without objection, we'll continue 7. If we can hold 6 on the desk, too, until we have 12 members. Any other specials, colleagues? We have an amendment on 13 that's already been circulated, Mr.
It's my understanding there may be an amendment on 13. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Yeah, let's do that. I know Ms. Perry is upstairs still with Energy and Environment confirmation. So, Mr. Rosendahl?
Special.
17 for Mr. Rosendahl. My pleasure. Any others? Yes, Mr. Alarcon?
On item 15, we actually wanted to call that item special.
Okay, 15.
For the purposes of amendment.
For Mr. Alarcon. Any other specials, colleagues? I think we still got a couple left. All right, if not, let's go ahead and open the roll on the balance, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 23 through 33, with the exception of 23 that was continued, are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. 33, we have a card from the public. The other ones have not received public hearings, but we do not have any public speaker cards for those items. Is anybody who wishes to be heard from the public on those? If not, we'll open and close the public hearings. Special items, colleagues, 24 through 32. 24 through 32. If no specials, let's go ahead and open the roll then on the balance, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
On the supplemental agenda, item 34 is an item for which public hearing has been held, and the Transportation Committee has submitted its report.
Okay. Ms. Gruhl?
Report yet, so we're just going to hold that on
Hold
the desk.
that for Ms. Gruhl. Next items, please.
Items 35 through 37 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. And I believe there are substitute motions in the works on 35 and 36 that have not yet come by.
All right, let's hold those on the desk. That leaves us with 37. On all 3 of those, I do not see any public speaker cards, so we'll go ahead and open and close the public hearings on that. 37, anybody wishing to call that special? If not, let's go ahead then and please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. If we can return now to public comment. We'll take up general public comment. Again, this is for items that are not on our agenda, but are nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the city, and 2 minutes per speaker, and we have a clock there to help you manage your time, and we appreciate you coming down to City Hall to give testimony today. And Mayla Lee Clinton McLean is our first speaker. After that will be Don Jones. Very good morning to you.
With butterflies and a beating heart, I stand before you again today to honor my word to the families of 14634 Magnolia who have faced unlawful eviction in the face of a condo conversion. I've given them my word that whenever possible I would be here to remind you of us and that you would not forget our story. On August 15th, 2007, the Magnolia 10 received a 60-day eviction. 6 weeks later, the Los Angeles Department of Housing did rule that the landlords, Mr. Brian Dror and Mr. Steve Fleischman, were in violation of Los Angeles municipal codes and owed relocation assistance to all tenants. 17 weeks have passed. The LADH has exhausted their ability to enforce the ruling and have urged us in writing to seek legal counsel at our own expense, a particularly painful blow to families who have exhausted their resources to move without the financial assistance owed them and who now face the holidays with rents in some cases over $1,000 more each month. In the wake of the scandal involving the other Magnolia tenants in the same district, last Tuesday, Councilmember Alarcon raised his concerns regarding the appearance of impropriety. I, too, am concerned about the appearance of landlords who profit as they break the law without the benefit of correction by the authorities who govern them. We represent the opportunity today that the Council can send a message, a different message to the Daily News and the Los Angeles Times about how things are done here at City Hall, a different message to landlords and to tenants all across Los Angeles who are not able to keep their homes as we wish to. Let the message be one of justice and equity, not one of compromised character and commerce. Let the message be that these laws, your laws, are for the benefit of all citizens, not just the ones who can afford them, who can afford to retain attorneys to enforce them. I'm not here seeking the privilege of endless interrogatories, discoveries, or depositions. On behalf of the 10 families of the 14634 Magnolia condos, I am here seeking justice. May it be found here, not in a court. Help me to find it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gruhl?
As we know, we're working with her and the departments to try to resolve that as well, so we will let the council know when we're able to do that.
Great. Thank you for that important update. We appreciate that. Don Jones is our next speaker. I was also, just so folks in Van Nuys know, it was handed the cards on speakers from Van Nuys, so 30 and 37 will be reconsidered, so we hear public comment on that as well as the public comment of Ms. Pearman after Mr. Jones speaks. Mr. Jones? Is Don Jones here? Oh, there he is. Good morning.
Good morning, President. Good morning, members of the council. I'm here because it's a matter of personal affront. I spoke before this august body last month in support of Councilman Huizar's Elephant Hills proposal. Since then, I've appeared on the blog of some creature called Zuma Dog. This creature has not only attacked me for speaking in public in support of a community issue, but he's also attacked my wife and made allegations of immorality, allegations that I am somehow a public fraud. Some of you have known me for a long time. Councilman Rosendahl and I have known each other for many years. I've known some of you for a long, long time. Mr. Alarcon and others. I see this attack as a chilling effect on my First Amendment rights. When I stand before this body and speak for 15 seconds only on a matter that affects my community, the community of East Los Angeles, and then I am held out to public ridicule by some creature I do not even know with postings that are called anonymous, I've been told by some of my friends on the council that I should just ignore this, that this is the ranting and the raving of a mad person. But I'm not constructed that way. I'm old school. I'm from Canton 14. And I want to say that this will not stand. When I see this creature, we will deal with it the old-fashioned way. But that's not for you all. What is for you here is to see that this is having a chilling effect on open dialogue, and that if something is not done to rein in this kind of attack on citizens who stand up in front of this body and try to get themselves heard, it is in fact depriving us of our civil rights. It is in fact making a mockery of our First Amendment rights. And I must say that if the dialogue does not begin here, where will it begin? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate your testimony today. We'll next go out to Van Nuys to hear from Donna Pearman. After that, we'll come back here from Mervyn Evans. Good morning, Ms. Pearman.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Councilman Garcetti, for always being on time, as handsome as ever. Nice tie. I again have to speak up for city employees who get unfairly bashed by people writing for the Daily News. John from Hollywood, Howard Jarvis organization, a good organization, thank God for Prop 13, said city employees are being highly paid for substantial work. Yet a lot of city services are done that's not public orientated. The reform of, therefore, a lot of work is being done without anyone fully realizing it, like our sewer services, for example. It's like federal employees. A lot of work is being done unseen, even in areas where the public only sees a small portion of employees, like Social Security. The city employees have the right to get a decent cost of living increase. It shouldn't even be tied to them saving money. Our city council gets their increases without saving city money. They only seem to spend it. They talk like city employees, they get the full 25% in 1 year. It's spread over like 5 to 7 years. They only get 4%. Even that's in 2 increments. Our liberals talk about the necessity of having illegal aliens, which is okay, undocumented workers. We would die without them. Yeah, what about families of city employees who pay good taxes, also spend a lot to keep our economy going? Aren't they important too? City employees are immigrants, minorities, handicapped, you name it, it's there, which is great. People should stand up and say, great, happy they work even harder. Unlike our city council, plenty of jobs goes for like the grocery stores, department stores, fast food. Also, they do substantial work sometimes. Does anyone talk about them? No, city employees have to be perfect. Always have to give everybody what they want. It can't be done. So let's applaud our city employees and let's stop this ridiculousness of saying city employees get paid too much money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mervyn Evans is our next speaker. After that, we'll have Daniel Wiseman.
Council President Garcetti, it's good to see you again. Spaying of dogs and cats is one of the most important things responsible pet owners can do. And we have far too many unwanted pets who are drifting the streets and causing public health hazards and a number of problems. But any notion that requires the state, such as AB 1634, to require every pet owner to spay their pet at 6 months, 180 days, any public policy that requires you to do that, I believe is foolish and unwise. And it takes away the liberty of the potential pet owner for whatever reason. We have a problem, but AB 1634 is not the answer. And so I strongly would hope that the council would take a look at that. Our friends and neighbors out there are welcome to visit longbeachvoterguide.info for additional information. But we can't have the state controlling every aspect of your life. This is Merv Evans. I want to say thank you very much, and I appreciate the privilege of being here.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Daniel Wiseman is our final speaker.
Well, I certainly agree with the previous speaker. Thank you so much, Mr. Evans. Mr. Garcetti, the lady from Van Nuys, my neighbor from Van Nuys, complimented you on being on time. But what I'm here to do is I'm here to suggest to my friends and my representatives on the City Council that this is now a continuation of the Energy and Environment Committee that just concluded. That committee, of which several of you are members, was left with one member when public comment came forward. At a suggestion of one of the commentators to put that off so that the public could comment to all of you, we were given such short shrift. The commenters were from the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Oversight Committee that has spent thousands and thousands of hours in considering the Department of Water and Power and its recent changes, both its rate changes and its new manager, possibly. We certainly refer to you, and I'm delighted to see a few eyes looking this direction, that you listen when a body that is part of city government, the MOU is a recognized part of city government, comes before you. What happened in the Energy and Environment Committee may have been necessary. I'll wait. Would you please hold the clock, please, until I get some attention? I'm sorry, sir. Public comment is for us to be able to address our legislators.
Sir, we can hear you.
And like happened upstairs, we expect to be listened to. As I look around here, I see no eyes. Excuse me, 2 eyes. Thank you, Mr. Wesson. 4 eyes. 6 eyes. Those of us with 4 eyes welcome those of you with 4 eyes. Thank you for listening to us. But really, the point here is that when we come before you, some recognition is expected. It was not occurred last night, this morning upstairs.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
glad to see it started this morning here in this room.
Thank you. That will end our public comment for today. We'll go now to items. Actually, before we go to items called special by members, we do have 12 members now, affording us the opportunity to pass these ordinances on the first go. We can take up items 1 and 2. And 6. Let's go ahead and open the roll on those. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. If we can reconsider 30 and 37 for cards from the public, let's just go ahead and take a vote on those, and we'll put them on the queue. Please open the roll for 30 and 37. Okay, please open the roll in reconsideration. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
We'll put those. We had two latecomers on public comment here, and we'd be happy to take those up before we go to the other items to reopen public comment. Soledad Garcia, if you'd like to come forward, and Humberto Camacho.
Thank you. This is a carryover from the Energy and Environment Committee. On behalf of the 74 Neighborhood Council Oversight members, I wanted to share a few ideas and thoughts with you. The newspaper stated that Mr. Nahai had not managed organizations of 8,000 people. He is not a finance person and is not an engineer. Could leadership and communication skills and reaching out to skilled and experienced personnel within DWP make up the difference? Will Mr. Nahai know how to focus on improving the efficiency in workforce management through the department and to implement seriously the recommendations of the Huron consultants? DWP has had 10 general managers acting at temporary in the past 10 years. Continuity of projects, department priorities, and lack of staff stability has caused waste. Will Mr. Nahai advance his pet projects cautiously on behalf of the community instead of artificially meeting a timeline? Will he continue to expend DWP funds on non-core projects? On behalf of the Neighborhood Council's Oversight Committee, we urge an open and cooperative working relationship with the General Manager. Will Mr. Nahai communicate with the Oversight Committee on common issues? Will Mr. Nahai respect and implement the 2007 Memorandum of Understanding? Will he incorporate the Neighborhood Council Oversight Committee on internal DWP oversight programs, budget, and infrastructure plans? Will he reconsider rate increases? Most state that the DWP should have a person who had managed a utility company before applying for the general manager position. Why was a national search not undertaken? I would like to share with you the final, his skills, his lawyer skills, which I think will serve him beautifully.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia. Humberto Camacho is next, and then Diane Rosen. Good morning.
Good morning, members of the City Council. Humberto Camacho, an old retired member of the union. My request for you to, after you declare the new manager for the Department of Water and Power, is to hold the rates for 1 year so we can break the new manager in, tell them how we work in the community, tell them to take care of the older people. I'm speaking for all the retired people. We have fixed incomes, and we cannot afford that excessive compound percentage increases that you are proposing. So therefore, I will say to you that we have to reinvent the whole system of how we can apply these rates to benefit the majority of the population, not only the industry or not only the big industrialists that are building such a huge apartments. We need to provide something for the people who have fixed incomes, especially the hiring of people in the communities where they don't have to travel 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 miles, so we don't have to use the gasoline. So therefore, my request for you is to give us enough time to break the new manager in, to provide the net income of revenues that we pay, and use those incomes only for the services and things that are used for the people in the community. We don't want donations, we don't want expenditures, we don't have political expenditures, just the service and restructure the needs for the community. So thank you, and I hope you put a moratorium on these increases once you declare the new manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Diane Rosen.
Good morning, council members. I'm Diane Rosen, chair of the Planning and Land Use of the Encino Neighborhood Council. I'm here today to speak to you about development, about marginal costs that are being put over onto the ratepayer, and are we bringing a general manager that is pro-development? We need to have a lid on some of what's going on because we can't supply it. And in order to do the infrastructure and build all that's necessary, these costs are being passed on to the ratepayer. So do we have leadership in the DWP that is going to look at the overall picture for the next, say, 10 years, because it's happening right now? The development is going to its maximum with SB 1818, and by the time we put a stop on it, it will be too late. So water and power and the supplying of water and electricity is a major, major concern. We need leadership that is going to look ahead for the next 10, 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosen. That will close public comment again. If we can take up item 8, I believe that there is, number 13. There is no amendment on that, so let's go ahead and open the roll on 13, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Next item, please.
Item 4 is the appointment of Mr. Oz Scott to the Cultural Heritage Commission.
Okay, we can ask Mr. Scott to come forward. Join us here at the table. Congratulations on your nomination. I'd like to recognize the chair of our Arts, Parks, Health and Aging Committee, Mr. Labange. This went through. Oh, sorry, it went through Plum. Okay, and Mr. Reyes is not here. Mr. Huizar, was
I'll speak to cultural heritage.
Okay, and then we'll hear from Mr. Huizar. Well,
Thank
go ahead,
you very
Mr.
much.
Huizar.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. As Vice Chair of Plum, I want to suggest to the Council that we fully support Mr. Scott on this appointment to the Cultural Heritage Commission. We heard him speak at the committee, very impressed with his credentials, commitment to serving the City of Los Angeles, and I think he would provide a great voice and listener to this commission as they make out and make very important recommendations to the city. Mr. Scott, if you just could briefly tell the Council your interest in serving on this commission and a little bit about your background as well. Thank you.
My father was a chaplain in the military, so we traveled a lot. So we were constantly being taken to museums and churches, and very, very interested in the cultural heritage. My mother was one of the founders of the African American Genealogical Society. She was a genealogist, so that there is a lot of, in my family, a lot of interest in cultural heritage. As I was talking to the committee, I was telling that my father's birthplace, his home in Virginia, I am renovating, which was probably not the smartest thing in the world, but it has sentimental value, and I think that's very important. I am a director. I do theater, I do film, I do television, and I'm constantly taking tours of doing location scouts through the city of Los Angeles, finding great locations to shoot my shows. I find that architecture speaks a lot to the people that live in those buildings, and so that I'm constantly looking and constantly impressed with the cultural heritage of this city, and I feel that I would be very honored to be a member of this commission. I have been on a number of I want to call them location scouts with the commission already, to see some Paul Williams homes, to see some other homes, and I see a lot of work ahead, but I find it fascinating. So I just want, and also, I guess I should say that my house was lost in the '94 earthquake in Northridge, the Northridge earthquake in Sherman Oaks. We probably were the worst case of wreckage. I mean, the insurance company would come, their secretaries and assistants would come by to look at our house. It was built in 1926, and when we did renovate the house, when we did actually build a new house, I pulled windows out of the old house because I wanted to retain something of what had a lot of historic value for me. And as one of the things I was thinking about was when my contractor told me he could finish off my house very quickly if I could just square off all of the bullnose doors and square off the arches in the house. I said, no, this is about architecture. This is about giving and keeping this going on. So,
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your willingness and commitment to serving on this commission. As we discussed in committee, we know that preservation is not only a link to our past, but our future in the city. As we revitalize some of our major corridors throughout the city, we're seeing that we also put value on some of these structures that are in there, the beautiful architecture, the history that has occurred on those places. And you have a very important job serving on this commission, so we look forward to working with you. And council members, I ask for unanimous support for Mr. Scott's appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hahn is our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Scott, we thank you for agreeing to serve on this commission, and we certainly have, as you mentioned, a great cultural heritage in the city of Los Angeles. The one thing I want to challenge you and your fellow commissioners on this commission is to make sure that you include the council office and the neighborhood councils before any designation is rendered on a particular building or neighborhood or piece of property. We had an incident just recently down in the San Pedro area where the commission voted on a designation without having heard from the neighborhood council, without having heard from the council office. So we just want to make sure you include everyone. Early notification in our city charter talks about before a commission makes a decision that they give the neighborhood council of that particular area plenty of time to weigh in on what you do. It's a very important commission, and it has far-reaching consequences on the decisions that you make. So that's what I would challenge you to just make sure, and maybe you be the one to always bring that up. Has the neighborhood council been heard from? Has the council office been heard from on a particular designation? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that it's very important to keep the community involved because the community is what creates the cultural heritage for the future, and I think we need to keep them very much a part of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you for willing to serve the city of Los Angeles. I know this building is, like I say, the top 5 buildings in my mind. This building, the Union Station, the Central Library, the Peristyle, the Coliseum, and the Observatory. Since you're going on that commission, what are your top 5?
What are my top 5?
Yeah.
I think you named. Union Station is gorgeous.
Right.
City Hall is gorgeous. For me, I am actually fascinated. I got to go to the basement of the Roslyn Hotel and see the speakeasy down there from the 20s. There's just gems just all over the city. And one of the things, just because I do live out in San Fernando Valley in Sherman Oaks, I'd love to investigate more out there because as I was going over a lot of the designations, a lot of them are in LA. And not out in San Fernando, but I just think that just looking at City Hall, and just looking at some of the windows in City Hall is just fascinating.
And I think Ms. Hahn said it right about including, and maybe there could be some outreach from your commission to the neighborhood councils to say, what do you think is important in your neighborhood? Because I think it's important to, before it becomes a crisis, when they're just trying to save a building, which is important, make that survey. I know the Getty did a survey and still has to be more work all of us need to do collectively on that, but I think it would be great to hear that. And also I just want to mention, I don't know if you know her or not, but she's a monumental person in my life, Anne Marie Johnson. I don't know if you ever worked with Anne Marie.
I've worked with Anne Marie Johnson.
She's a great person.
Absolutely.
So, okay. All right, congratulations. I vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to be heard? If not, let's go ahead and we'll open the roll on your nomination, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations. A round of applause for our new commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Next item, please.
Item 5 is the permanent appointment of Ms. Rita Robinson as the permanent general manager of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. And for the record, the salary has been established at $208,612.08.
It's like deja vu all over again. Come on forward, Ms. Robinson, and I'd like to recognize the chair of our Transportation Committee, Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Rita, for your willingness to serve. Colleagues, Rita Robinson, for many of you know, has been a member of the city family for a long time and has taken on some difficult tasks. She has taken on the housing department, the sanitation department, and for a while the transportation department. And there's one thing about Rita is she is a consummate professional and someone even in the brief, how long have you been the acting general manager now?
8 weeks.
8 weeks, okay. In 8 weeks, I have seen her everywhere and engaged in the issues that are so important to us. There is no more important issue in this city than transportation and traffic. I cannot tell you, and I know my colleagues can attest to this as well, cocktail conversation, dinner conversation, on the way to school conversation, wherever it may be, this is the issue of the day. And so we are, not to put pressure on you, Rita, but we are counting on you to be able to lead this department, to support the systems that are there, and to come to us with, I think, projects, programs, and more importantly, a strategic plan that says where we're going in the future, which is so critically important. And colleagues, some people may say, what does it matter to have a strategic plan? Well, in fact, it is important because as we go to apply for funds on the state and federal level, they're going to ask us, how does this fit in your larger system? How are you working with the MTA and SCAG? How are you going to be able to fund this? Have you gotten community support? Is there consensus built around these issues? And what we've seen is movement in that direction. We've been working very closely with the mayor, who is 100% behind this effort, as to come forward and to do short-term and long-term programs. And we have, whether it be light synchronization or left-hand turn signals or street repair, those are important issues for us in the city of Los Angeles. But we need a department to implement that. And so we are going to probably be writing you a bit to make sure that we are fully utilizing all of the resources we have and that we can be able to successfully go to that state and federal government and say, we need your help. We've done this much work. We need your assistance there. And clearly, as we look at parking policy, was another issue that is before us, we know that your department is going to be the implementer and that we have a lot of work to do. This is an issue whose time has come. Unfortunately, it has taken too long to get to the position we are today to acknowledge that relationship between planning and transportation. And I know in my conversations with Gail Goldberg, she is very excited about the opportunity and to work with you, and that you have had numerous conversations not only about the strategic plan that we're coming forward to and to marry that, so to speak, with our planning documents that we were required to put forward as well, and to have one comprehensive approach to how we're going to be doing that. I just want to, and I want to ask her to give her a few minutes, and I know I'm over my 3 minutes, but do I get my 6 minutes?
Okay,
thank you.
So don't worry, you have 3 more
minutes.
minutes.
So what I'd like to do is now, I've given you a little bit of where we're going, Rita, and ask you to say a few words about the challenges that you're facing, and you as a general manager as the Department of Transportation. Thank you, and hold my time.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Gruhl, and thank all of you who have been such supporters of so many difficult issues that we as a city have faced, because we faced them in housing, we faced them, certainly we did in sanitation, and now in transportation issues and traffic issues. And what I often say is, as much as they are challenges, they are also competing goods, because we know that they're all good things that we want to do, but we can't sometimes get them all done at the same time. And so we have to decide what's the best thing to do in the situation that we're in. And even though if we're dealing with situations such as traffic, we're also dealing with transit as one element of people getting people out of cars, infrastructure issues, our roads and highways and how to get around. All of our other partners that are in the room with us, Caltrans, Metro, chambers of commerces and businesses and neighborhood councils. In this arena, there are a lot of people who want to get into the room to discuss what we think are the competing goods and how we work this out. I think one of the things that we must do as a city is to have a strategic plan on where we're going on a regional basis so that we understand that not only is it just a jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation, who has a very small segment of a larger picture. So my hope, I called it last week when I was talking to one of the developers, a nesting box. You keep pulling out one box after the other of all the layers that exist within this issue. And what I want to do is to get the department focused on what our core missions are within the department, what it is that we have jurisdiction over, how those resources within the department are used, how that budget lines up with those goals and objectives, and then in a broader sense, how do we link then with the regional issues of traffic and transit and how to tie those things together. And of course, as you mentioned, parking is an important issue because that indicates that we're assisting cars to get to places, but then how do we use shuttles and other methodologies to try to get people to one location and then maybe shuttle them to other places that would maybe cut down on a lot of the internal traffic. And then we have our engineering issues that we're dealing with, as we listened yesterday about Pico Olympic, and trying to do things that we think would ease some of the traffic congestion within the city on a case-by-case basis, and maybe even as we begin to reach out, see what works so we can reach that into regional areas. We also have other issues that are coming toward us, like congestion pricing and other ideas like HOV toll lanes. So at the same time that we're interested in doing this as a city, I think that nationwide and worldwide, they're looking for ways to deal with it. And then I think on the other side of this issue also are our pedestrians and our bikers, and how do they get around in a city with so many people and so much congestion as well, so that people are safe. Because I think a foundation of all this has to be safety, because that's what we really want to do. And as a department, I think that it's a department that's kind of, in some ways, lost its way. So we need to focus internally on what it is that we really want to accomplish and what we can accomplish. And as we begin to get our footing, begin to see how that reaches out to the broader community and helps the city. And what I would ask all of you to do is to reinvest in the Department of Transportation. It is such gold there in terms of the people that want to do such an excellent job. They are such experts, they are such professionals, and they have such expertise. And what I'd like for us to do is, as we begin to talk about all the new things you want us to do, is to also look at the talent that's there and to be able to reinvest in that talent so it can reach out and help the constituents better, because we're not responding to constituents' needs the way we should. We're not proactive with regard to development and other issues that come to the city, because we just really don't have the internal infrastructure to do that. So maybe not this year, because I know it's a very tough budget year, and I hear Councilmember Parks discuss that. But as we plan for next year, if you have a little faith in us, I think that we can prove our production and our results and our productivity to the mayor and all of you. And then if you reinvest a little in us, I think that we can get to many of the goals that we have in common across the board.
Well, thank you. And clearly, colleagues, you can see that Rita, in her short time, although you were in the Department of Transportation for 3 years, correct?
About a year and a half.
Oh, year and a half. I'm sorry, year and a half. It felt like 3 years. Okay. That this issue and the traffic has reached crisis proportions, to that we have to think about things we would have never ever considered before. Who would have thought we'd talk about hot lanes and congestion pricing and one ways and all of these issues? But I think people are now willing to at least have that conversation and implement something that is going to make a difference in the city of Los Angeles, because it has really deteriorated the quality of life for so many people. One of the items and the reason why a strategic plan, and I think you're saying focused inward for a little bit of what the department is responsible for. There's a lot of misinformation out there as to what DOT is responsible for and what is Caltrans and what is MTA and others. And I think that we want to hold you accountable for the things you're responsible for, but we also want to make sure that there's those linkages. And all too often, DOT has been on its own over here and not necessarily linking up with those other areas. And I know that that is your goal, to bring this department back to where we were the ADSAC, creating these things that were national models for the rest of the country. This is not a problem that was developed overnight, and it's not a problem that can be solved tomorrow, but we need to act as though we can solve it tomorrow and move ahead because the frustration level has hit such a high level here in the city of Los Angeles. I know, Rita, we're going to put you on the hot seat a lot of times to make sure that when we have something, and I know you will be able to respond. You've been in that hot seat before on some issues and shown your strength and resolve and willingness to learn things you don't know, but also take your knowledge of a manager, which is very important in the city of Los Angeles, and to help this department reach the expectations that so many of us have, and particularly the constituency. I know that you have, I think, your extended family here behind you, and maybe you'd like to recognize them as well, why they're here, because I know they are giving up a little bit of you to be to be head of this department. So would you like to introduce
Well, thank you
your
very
guest?
much. I'd also like to thank Mayor Villaraigosa for his faith in
twisting
in me.
your arm, okay.
And twisting of the arm a bit, but not too much. But basically, I think we're on the same wavelength. And for your tremendous support of Enrique Zaldivar and running the Bureau of Sanitation, because my heart was really with that department as we built it, with a great, incredible staff there. And for so many people there that have been such a wonderful help to me, I really want to extend my appreciation to them for making me stronger to be able to even have the courage to take on this effort this time.
Well, and let me just add to that. I mean, I think one of the reasons that you recognize as a good manager is the fact that you helped, and Enrique is a great person, but you also delegated and created this environment in which they could succeed. So,
and that's exactly what I like to build as a team in transportation as well. And I want to thank all of those in transportation who have been by my right side from the minute I was named as the new head, who have just stuck beside me and taken on the last 8 weeks like gangbusters. And I so appreciate every single person there as well who has been such a help. But the real things that sustain me, because people have asked me this just recently of how I've been able to manage this, and I have to say that it's taken a lot out of me, but I would say that the few things that make me tick, I guess, are a great faith that is greatly rooted, it continually sustains me on a minute-to-minute basis, and I would say that's my greatest strength. But great family and friends who make it all work, and I think we all can attest to that. And though my mother is no longer here and my grandparents are no longer here, I can feel their strength in me every day. But my dad in St. Louis, Missouri, Steve Lambert, and my brother and family in Detroit, Malcolm Barnes, are here with me. But those that are really here with me physically today, my dad, my mom, Lena Thurman, is not here, but my dad, Dr. William Thurman, is here this morning. I'd like to thank him so much. Him and Mom have been my adopted parents since I was 13, and they have always been a strength of my life, and I really appreciate that entire family for being a part of my life. My best friend since I was 11, Denise Singleton, is here this morning, and she has been a sustaining force in me forever and knows me better than anybody, and know you can't ask her any questions. My uncle, Willie Christian, is here this morning, who serves Ms. Perry in one of your senior citizens centers, and has been just a great support to my life, and so I really appreciate you being here, Uncle Willie, and love you dearly. And many friends across the city who have came up to me and called me and said they're praying for me, thinking about me. I appreciate every single one of you, wherever you are, for being my family in this city. The last couple of years have not been easy years on a personal level, between losing my mother and losing a relationship that meant a lot to me, and also trying to rebuild my house all at the same time. They were tough times, and my family at sanitation really helped me out a lot. So I'd like to thank all of them for being there for me, Christina, Holly, and Lynn. And especially Cynthia Perez and Karina Reyna, which I never would have made it through each day without them. I certainly send my love to each one of them. But the person that came into my life after so much strange and crazy lifestyle one day later was Michael Caine, and my partner is here this morning, Michael Caine, and I'd like to thank you for being here. And for being such an incredible part of my life. So
I think we deserve a round of applause for all of the people who are here supporting you, and thank you very much.
And also the one person that's here that probably wanted this job for me more than I wanted it for myself is Frankie Banerjee. And she has been my friend, my mentor, and has taught me so much, and I really appreciate her as my friend, and you know, my deepest love for you exists. And one of my former bosses that was just here this morning, I saw George Wolfberg, who I learned so much for in the CAO's office. So I could never tell any of you, all of you have been great leaders in my life and great mentors, and I appreciate each and every one of you, and we will make this journey together. We will do it together, because it will take great courage to do this job the way we have to do it. And I told the staff the other week, I said that we have to acknowledge the fear, because anything we do that changes anything will be very fearful to people. All the things that we're talking about make people afraid, and certainly from Councilmember Smith, I learned about great fear firsthand. But I learned about fear from a different perspective, that anytime you ask people to make change, it's fearful to them. Anytime you've asked me to change, it's been fearful to me. But we acknowledge the fear, but we act on the dream. Because unless you act on the dream, you'll never do anything. And so you have to look beyond that fear and act on what you think can be. And certainly that's what we'll be doing as a city, acting on the dream.
Well, thank you very much. And my last word here was action. I had written down here, so appropriate that that's what we're expecting, and know that you will deliver as a general manager, the Department of Transportation. So thank you for extending the time here, and thank you, Rita, for your willingness to serve. It's a big task, but I know you're up to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rule. We have 7 council members so far that wish to be heard. Traffic is a small issue in the city, I think.
Yeah.
We will start with Mr. Zine, then we will go to Mr. Parks, Mr. Smith, Mr. Labange, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Cardenas, and Mr. Weezer.
I think this is all good, since we're all asking questions. I don't think it's bad, so don't think it's bad, Rita. How many years have you been with the city?
I'm 30 years.
All kinds of different jobs. Where'd you start?
A student professional worker in the summer program.
There you go. And I started as a student worker, too, so some of us can join the city as youngsters and move up the ladder, and here we are. And you held this position. What, Richard? Some do better than others. You're absolutely right. And obviously Rita has. Thank you. And you used to write the test, so we know where that's coming from. You held this for a year and a half in the past, Department of Transportation. You worked for the Department of Transportation?
Yes, sir.
A year and a half. How many years ago was that?
About 6 years ago.
Okay, traffic's obviously worse than it was 6 years ago. And 6 years down the road is going to be much worse than it is now. So we expect you to fix it all. And there's a song that the Beatles made, and the song's about you. You know which one that is?
Yes,
I already sang that to you, didn't I?
You did.
Lovely Rita, Meter Maid? Okay. So it's not everyone has a song that they can say is their trademark song. I've got Dragnet, Bad Boys, those kind of songs. Neighborhood councils. We had an issue in my district where the neighborhood council was not involved, not informed, and it created quite a dilemma. So I just want to make sure that the folks at DOT realize neighborhood councils are critical. They're part of that chain that we need to communicate with and bring in the focus. Mr. Fisher was very helpful in trying to patch up, and we still haven't resolved the whole issue, but we're trying to. But I think if we, in the initial stages, bring in neighborhood councils, and we're going to make some changes, We know what's happening with Olympic and Pico. We want to have them work with us instead of against us. So just a message to include them. I know in my district I do as much as possible. In the particular matter I'm talking about, we weren't even involved. We didn't even know. So that communication is so critical. So we're all in the same boat together trying to resolve it instead of fighting back and forth. And development and transportation. We know that development is continuing in the city of Los Angeles, everywhere. And the concern I have, as well as people who commute the roads, the commute's getting longer and longer and longer. Many of us aren't able to use public transit on a daily basis because we have other activities we have to do. So just think about the people who have to drive back and forth to work, who have to fight that traffic, the gridlock every single day. And I don't think toll lanes on the freeway and the carpool lanes is going to solve the problem. But you've got a huge task ahead of you, and I will pledge my support. I know that Department of Transportation has had some, shall we say, ups and downs in the past, but I have great respect for your reputation and your infectious smile. You're always smiling. You make us feel good even though things are bad in the traffic situation. But I really trust that you'll be able to bring it around with your leadership and working with the department representatives and the council offices, neighborhood councils, pull it together, because it's a task that some people would say, I don't even want to challenge. And you're taking that challenge. But I will give you my support and my cooperation in my office, and I know that together we can bring about some positive change instead of the attitude, well, it's just going to be there, we just have to take longer and longer to get to our destination. So I wish you well with it, and to the members who are here supporting you, thank you for being here. Every person has an army behind them, and Rita has your army behind them as well as our army behind them. It's nice to see Frankie come back to City Council. She's saying, I'm glad I'm done with that one. Now it's somebody else's challenge.
You got it
So there you go. She's on your cell phone. She'll be taking care of you. So the best to you, Rita, in this new endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to congratulate Rita and really tell her how much we're going to miss her in sanitation. Amazing job that you've done there in putting the city on the right path and really standing your ground often when many people may have wanted to hear something different, but you were always on point. Stood your ground, and I think it was really a reflection of your leadership that got so many things done as relates to that area. I think you probably have been in more departments as an interim or a general manager than anyone alive, and I think it's because there's so much confidence in your abilities, and we certainly just want to say support you whatever you need from my office, or as we go through a variety of things like budget. We certainly look forward for your counsel and your independent judgment that you've had a tendency to do. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parks.
Mr. Smith.
Don't be afraid. Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to rise and support that. I got to say, when Rita Robinson came to the Bureau of Sanitation a couple of years ago, I wasn't sure, because I'd seen a department that historically had had no innovation, no energy, no ideas. It was just a department that did the same thing every day. In the last couple of years, we have seen more innovation, more excitement, more new programs, more advancement in the Bureau of Sanitation than the previous 2 decades. And I am really sorry to see you leave that department, because we really worked up a great relationship to move that department forward, to bring forward new ideas, new policies, new techniques that have really made the Department of Sanitation a really premier department of the city of LA, and I'm very proud of what you accomplished. Now you're really needed in Department of Transportation. And I think everyone knows around here, we've gone through 2 general managers, and Frankie Banerjee came in and tried to hold it together for a very short time between 2 general managers that really failed. Failed the department, failed the city, failed the staff. You have a staff that is very demoralized, and you know that. Staff who wants to do good things that have been held back. And I think that you're going there will do what you did at sanitation, that you're going to create energy, excitement, bring new ideas forward to solve the problems of LA. I warn you, though, fear again that you had in sanitation, is that you have a lot more resistance probably to new ideas than you had with sanitation. that there was a willingness with sanitation because of the environmental movement to change things, that there's a big issue with transportation because everything you do has somebody that's against it. And so we will be there by you all the way. I want you to know anything you need from me, you come see me, and I will be there 100% with anything I can get for you, because this is a department that needs energy, needs ideas, and needs your enthusiasm to bring it to the level that we need it in Los Angeles. And you're going to have some resistance, and you will have people who don't want to change. But we need change desperately in Los Angeles, and there is nobody that Mayor Villaraigosa could have found for us that will solve the problems of the Department of Transportation better than Reba Robinson. And I'm sorry to see you leave sanitation, but we've accomplished those goals. We've made so many great changes there, and now we just need to do that in transportation. And I thank you for your willingness to step back over the line and go back into transportation. The people of LA are going to benefit from your experience and your knowledge and your ability to bring people in and say, bring me your ideas. Let's see if we can find a way to do this, which we haven't seen there for some time. So God bless you for all you've done in sanitation, and I know we'll be standing here in a few years saying thank you for all you did in transportation as well. Good luck, Rita. You're going to be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Smith.
So in a few years, traffic will be solved? We'll be set? All right. Looking forward to it. Mr. Labange is our next speaker. After that is Ms. Hahn, and then Mr. Rosendahl.
Rita, a lot of people said a lot of great things, and I'll say them too, and to your family and friends. It's just wonderful. Your leadership to your city family that's here retired, it's wonderful, because there was a draft, if I could use a football analogy. I know Ms. Hahn gets real upset. There was a draft that year when you and others came to the city hall to do something, to make a difference. And it doesn't matter what your skill set is, it matters how your ability to work with people and have them achieve greatness. And I like what Mr. Smith just said, as others, about how you're doing that. Transportation is one of the fine departments, and some of their leaders are here with you in other areas. I just want to stress the point of collaboration, and I don't know if we can, and I don't know if the mayor's representative is here. Is that correct? If we could ask that, Doug Failing from Caltrans sits on that MTA board ex officio. Maybe you could get on that board ex officio to help bridge the gap, and maybe you could look at that to see what technically could be done. He doesn't vote, but he's there fighting for Caltrans. We need you there to fight for DOT. And DOT and other little cities too, because many cities, I think there's 22 cities that touch Los Angeles or are engulfed by Los Angeles. Also, your team, what is your, I have a philosophy about big traffic on big streets. And I know Pauline Chan does a great job, I think, still in the area. Tell us a little about neighborhood protection. Traffic.
And traffic in neighborhoods is very important to us, and I know John Fisher has been at the helm for a number of years with district offices and trying very hard. But just in the last few weeks, I've been out to 5 neighborhood councils and 2 Los Angeles chambers and a number of homeowner associations to discuss how neighborhoods can assist us to help them. And so one of the things that we're doing is trying to strengthen that staff and that outreach. And there's some amazing staff who have worked very well, not only at the staff level in DOT, but also at the council levels, who have been very supportive in us making sure that neighborhoods and their issues are being addressed. And that's one of the things we like to strengthen in our community, to make sure that they also know that we're there for them.
I appreciate that, and I also think working with Gail Goldberg and the planning, because everybody puts that connection together, and also working with Chief Bratton of the police department. I know I've fought for a deputy chief of traffic, which doesn't have one, but maybe we can get an administrative position over there to help and re-energize that effort to the police department. And I'm glad you mentioned Mr. Fisher, because he's very helpful to all of us in trying to get those traffic signal improvements. I know with Mr. Wesson, we're looking at the problem now on Olympic Boulevard, and Zachy and the great job, and Robert and everybody, and Harry Paul, among many here, and Jasmine, and all of them who are sitting out there I could see. It's very important. So collaborate, work together, and help those traffic officers who have a tough job, because they give the citations nobody wants, but also they help move traffic through the streets safely. Thank you very much, and enjoy your work, and call on me whatever I can do to help you or your department.
Thank you,
Mr. Labange. Ms. Hahn is our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, think you're a wonderful pick to lead this important department. And certainly, we've got to look at a regional solution to traffic. But as we know, it's all about neighborhood by neighborhood, and the traffic problems in everybody's community adds up to the traffic problems across the region. One of the issues that I think we're really beginning to grapple with certainly is the connection between land use and traffic. It's come to my attention because of a particular project that has been proposed in the harbor area, that the developers submit their traffic studies and their traffic mitigation ideas as part of their EIR, and traditionally we pretty much accepted that and made that just a part of the process. We found in San Pedro that those numbers seem to not tell the truth. The numbers that have been proposed as a part of a development really don't tell the real truth about traffic. They don't tell the real truth about the overall impact that traffic is going to have. What can we do you think, to improve that whole formula of how we're projecting traffic patterns that are associated with developments that are proposed every day here in the city of Los Angeles?
Well, thank you for bringing it up, Councilmember Hine, because I just had that discussion with staff as I was being briefed on a number of major projects within the city of Los Angeles. And one of the things I challenged the staff regarding was that we should be the proactive arm of that EIR review, not the reactive arm of it as a department, that we should hold the feet of the developer to the highest level of fire if possible, not to burn them up, because that's certainly not our purpose. Our purpose is to be able to show what's the worst that could happen, and then with mitigations and measures they propose, what's the best that could happen. And we need to have our own tools in our own toolbox, not their tools, but our tools. So that's what I meant by a reinvestment in the department. I think that because the department has somehow lost its way, that there has been a disconnect between how the department is staffed to be able to have those tools in its toolbox, and then to be able to build the house you want them to build. So just as we rebuilt just as Dale Biaggi and Harry Sizemore and Judy Wilson built that infrastructure, sanitation, Frankie began building that infrastructure within transportation, and with her by my side, we're going to start rebuilding it and remodeling that process to be able to have the infrastructure to be proactive in those EIRs, to hold their feet to the fire so that the public will begin to believe the story. Because you're right, most of the stories that are told are the easiest stories that are told. They're not the hard issues that we really need to look at as we begin to put development, land use, and traffic all together in one box. And be assured, I've already had many discussions with Gail Goldberg. I've already spoke very much with her, Bud Overham, and the mayor's office on economic development. And so I'll be working closely with how do we slowly, I know that we don't have a lot of money in the general fund, but a lot of these are being paid for by developers, but we want to do a job not for the developers, but the job for the city.
Right.
And then we will assist the developers to be able to have a plan that the city can be proud of.
Right, because once a developer leaves, it's the people who travel those streets on a daily basis that are impacted. And I love that idea about it. We ought to have the tools in our toolbox. And those tools need to be sharp, and they need to be updated. I just think a simple thing like seniors, this traffic pattern of seniors, well, I think it's outdated. I'll say it here live on TV. I'm a senior now. I think my traffic patterns shouldn't be lumped together with, my mother who's 83, her traffic patterns, and yet they are in this formula. So those are the kind of things we need to take a look at. 55 is the new 35, and we drive a lot.
And I feel your pain. I'm with you there, too.
And that ought to be factored in. Let me bring up another issue, and that's crossing guards. And typically, again, a lot of people don't realize that it's our Department of Transportation that provides the crossing guards. Walking to and from school these days is dangerous. It's treacherous. It is a whole new idea about safe passage, getting our kids to and from school. I think the school district needs to probably pony up a little bit more to help it, but right now it's one of our responsibilities. We don't typically provide guards at middle schools or high schools, and yet just last week there was a high school student in Wilmington, a female student at Banning High School who was hit by a car crossing at PCH and Broad. I've introduced a motion today to explore the possibility of us providing crossing guards where it's needed, whether or not it's a high school, a middle school, or a elementary school. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the safety, as I said, is the real foundation of many of the things that we need to look at. I know we talk about cars and buses and shuttles. There's also pedestrians and bikers that we need to be on the lookout for. And I know that the department under Mr. Tana started the Watch the Road program to help traffic calming, because, and I always say it's driver calming, not traffic calming, because we are traffic ourselves. But I think that crossing guards who provided incredible service to the city can be, we can discuss ways in which we can utilize that staff in a way that could help us in some of the areas of concern regarding pedestrian crossings, even in high schools and middle schools, because I think it's becoming increasingly dangerous with some of the areas of the city. And as we look at resources and as we look at the most needed places, I think we can bridge the gap. Because, I'm always open to new ideas.
Right.
And just because we've done it one way all the time doesn't mean we can't.
And I think we need to maybe sit down with the school district and ask for a little help in that partnership. I know I'm over my last thing. One of the other issues, it is about slowing down traffic. Everybody drives too fast in our area, and particularly through neighborhoods. Speed bumps are something that a lot of neighborhoods feel is a tool that really does calm the driver. We get complaints about it sometimes, but the process seems to be a little bit laborious, a little bit difficult, and there's some frustration out there in the neighborhoods because of our process about ultimately approving and installing speed humps. Can you take a look at that and give us some suggestions on how we might improve that process? Because I think it really does work to slow down drivers, but our process is a bit difficult.
And I did mention that in committee just last week. Mr. Alarcon had an issue regarding that with regard to slowing traffic in schools as a safety issue. And so I talked to the staff about perhaps we need to go back to our standards and look at them and bring them up to 2008 standards, because I think that we have often made things difficult for ourselves as well as for the public. And I'd really like to demystify not only the money but the processes and try to pull the department into real time so that, we're not spending 10 years reviewing something that was a standard then, but I think we can pump that up a little bit and make it a little easier for people to understand how it is they can get things done in their neighborhood more effectively.
Right, because our neighborhoods are our partners as we're moving forward with solving transportation. So good job. We look forward to working with you, and I think you're going to do a great job leading this department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Rosendahl is our next speaker.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm not going to talk much on this except to say bless you for stepping to the plate. I appreciated your prayer in the beginning about your deceased family and friends and relatives and the strength that they give you to do this job. You truly have the most pivotal and most significant job in the city going forward right now of any of the other issues. We have lots of problems in the city. We have lots of challenges. But the gridlock is from everybody from San Diego to Santa Barbara. It is a huge regional crisis. Everybody's had it. You and I have had nothing to do with creating it. We're trying to solve it. So I'm 100% there for you. I know you're going to reach out to the smaller cities in the county. I know you're going to reach out to the other counties. And as I've said publicly a million times, we need real leadership from the governor and the mayor, talking about regionalism, talking about the monies we need and how we're going to get the monies. And we need to put a 20-year plan up on the boards and show the populace, not just LA City residents, but everybody, that in year 5 we will have accomplished this, in year 10 we will have accomplished that, so that we have hope that we're going to get out of gridlock. I am 100% there with you. We look forward to your leadership. I'm on that committee, and it's an honor to be working with you. Bless you for stepping up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman.
Mr. Cardenas.
Mr. Cardenas?
We will hold Mr. Cardenas and Mr. Huizar, if you'd like to go ahead.
Who's up?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, and congratulations. After many years with the City of Los Angeles, I want to thank you for taking this huge challenge on. And I wanted to ask just one very basic question. What's the first change you will make as the general manager for this department?
Well, I think I've already made a change in saying that we will begin to produce results. And we were extremely successful in getting reports in that needed to get into the Transportation Committee because I think that because the department felt a little bit lost, that we just needed to find our basic way. So the first change was just showing some results. And in a situation where we had worked on with regard to getting our fair share from the MTA board over a number of years in order to assist in our transit funds, we presented that information to the mayor's office, to Councilmember Parks, who is on the board, and others. And last week, the MTA board voted in our favor to give us more of a fair share of the funding to support transit, which we'll see when we do the Prop A report, that we will have, instead of a $212 million shortfall over the next 10 years, less than an $80 million shortfall over the next 10 years. I think that having wins like this are the things that need to give momentum to staff, because just like anything else, if you can make that first lap in the swimming pool or even learn how to float, you're so excited about the prospect of being able to do more. So with the department, we began to start at the basics and build our way up, and then being able to link with those situations of understanding that we need a strategic plan in order to know where to go. In sanitation, we did the same thing. We started working with our core services, developing a mission and goals, and then trying to figure out where we go from here. And this is the same thing we'll be doing with the Department of Transportation, is internally developing a strategic goal, strategic plan, so that we will know our focus point like a compass, and then be able to reach out to those other challenges that are before us that will help the city and this region.
Now, there are services that the department provides that are basic, putting up stop signs where they need to be, making sure the speed humps go up. But also, it seems that transportation and improving transportation is probably one of the most important items, or one of the most heard of issues by the public, that they say do something about it. So there's a challenge that the public is putting upon this city, and particularly this department, to say, don't only provide us with your normal duties that you do, but you need to be proactive, get some real solutions to transportation. Is the department equipped, either financially or personnel-wise, to take on that challenge at this time?
Well, I appreciate that question, Councilmember Wizard, because that's the way I was maybe dancing around it, to say no, that it has really been stretched beyond its capacity to deal with the bigger picture that people have an expectation of the department of. And certainly, I don't mean by the individuals that are there, because certainly they have stretched themselves to be able to answer. You have people like Harold Paul and Jay Kim and Mr. Fisher and Amir Sadati, who was brought in to help us on our parking issues. We have some incredibly talented staff internally, Jim Lefton. However, they need assistance as well beneath them in order to build that infrastructure I was mentioning. So that's one of the things we'll be doing, is to build an infrastructure that answers the bigger picture in terms of not only equipment, but also in processes, also in expertise of engineers. All of those things are needed, because as I will tell you, as lay people, we may see that there are problems that exist, but they have to be engineered. They're not just something that you go out and you put up a bunch of cones and say this is the way it's done. We even have Chief Jimmy Price and the traffic officer staff very intricately involved in how we make the city work better. So you're correct that it's a very fair question that no, the department has not been equipped in the investment that this city needs to make in it to produce the results that you want. And those are some of the things we'll be working with my new acting general manager over admin, Selwyn. Will be working on this situation with us with regard to the money that we need in the department. But as I said, I never come and ask you for huge amounts of money or huge amounts of staff to start with. What I've always done is to systematically look at where we'd like to go, give us a minimum amount to get there, let us show results, and then reinvest more resources into us into the future. So that's, even in this budget year that's very tough, those are the steps that we'll be taking. But I will ask your assistance both in personnel and in finance find answers with regard to reorganizing our internal staff as we have it so that we can better address our needs.
Thank you. And two quick questions. All of us favor more public transit, and we often look to the MTA to ask them to do something about it, whether it's the subway or more rail lines or improving the current bus system they have. But one public transit system that we do have control over, that the public is asking for more routes, is a DASH system.
Absolutely.
And I've been on council 2 years, and I've been asking, well, what can we do about that? The answer I get is, well, our prop dollars are declining, and in fact, we're concerned because we may not have the funding necessary to even operate what we can. We can't increase the capacity of the DASH right now because we don't have the funding, and in the future that money is jeopardized. And I think that's a real asset because we do have control of that public transit system, but I haven't heard much around the city as to what is the answer to that. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yes, there may not be answers that we've made public, but within the department, with Jim Lepton and Jay Verpinci and the staff there, with Phil, we have had many discussions and just had one yesterday about Prop A and Prop C, how we can, first of all, make a determination internally how we like to see those funds used and be able to bring to you ideas that will assist us to be able to enhance and keep solvent our DASH system and commuter bus systems. So you'll be seeing more of that in the near future.
I think we should not only enhance what we have now, keep what we have now, but really think about how we could expand those
Absolutely.
routes. Because even if the MTA does their job, the city has this DASH system that goes into the hard-to-reach small streets in our neighborhoods that people could be encouraged to take public transit. If we get them from their home, go down the small, windy streets to a larger public transit system. So I hope that we put our full attention on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. Mr. Cardenas is our next speaker.
Good morning, Rita. It might be afternoon by the time we're done, but I think overall it's a good thing that we're having this dialogue. I've enjoyed working with you. I think that you have the kind of leadership and skills it takes to run many departments within the city or county or what have you. You have the skills that it takes to make sure that you get the workforce moving in the right direction, you get things balanced, you get things in order, and make the best of it. So I have a lot of high hopes and expectations that you're going to do as good a job as we expect and as good a job as you've done so far. But one of the things that you mentioned earlier is about acting on dreams. But unfortunately for us, when people talk about traffic in the city of Los Angeles, they talk about a nightmare. And in order for us to turn the corner on that nightmare, to get out of this nightmare and into what would be more of a dream state, we need to do a lot of things in this city. But as was mentioned earlier, we have an authority that budgets in and around us, above us. We have a state legislature that enacts and decides where funds go and how much and when. And then we have which projects are going to get funded. And then on top of that, we have a federal government that also has strings attached whenever they send us money that has to do with transportation. And you know and I know the best decisions are made on transportation and other things are here at the local level. But in some ways, our hands are tied, or maybe it's kind of like one hand tied behind our back. Let me clarify something or if you could help me clarify something for the people viewing, the people who complain about traffic, the people who complain about our streets and our conditions, etc. Are you going to be in charge of fixing potholes?
No, we're not in charge of fixing potholes.
Okay. Are you going to be in charge of street paving?
No, we're not in charge of street paving.
No, because I think that we get as many complaints about the potholes and the street paving and the lack thereof as we do about the traffic and the time people take to get to and from work or take their children to school, etc. So the bottom line is, what is it in a nutshell that is the main purview that is your department's responsibility?
The Department of Transportation's responsibility is within the arterial streets of the city, meaning the transit streets within the city, not the freeways, not the buses that are metro buses, but we have jurisdiction over the signals, within the city of Los Angeles. We have jurisdiction over traffic officers and crossing guards, jurisdiction over the signal installation and maintenance that many of you know Zachy, who runs that operation very well, and field operations, stop signs, speed humps, those things that control neighborhood issues, responding to development that may come into the neighborhood regarding those things, and with regard to our internal bus system, the DASH system, and the commuter express system. So sort of in a nutshell, that's really what the Department of Transportation has its core jurisdiction over. Our bigger responsibility is to link with Caltrans and other agencies, Metro, MTA, that have authority in those other areas. And we are in the Caltrans building with Doug Frayling. I've had total outreach to Roger Snowball, who's head of MTA, as we look at all the other pieces of the puzzle that make up Los Angeles.
So now let's let the public understand, when I said one hand tied behind our back, when it comes to the MTA, the state government, et cetera, and these other authorities that have bigger pots of money than we do they tend to make decisions based on what we plan and what we want, more or less, or do they tend to make decisions and then we got to figure out how we fit in most of the time? Which of those two does it come out to?
Generally, from what I understand, it's more the latter. That
Meaning?
They make their big plans and then we fit our way into them the best way we can, if we get our hand in there at all.
Okay. And then when you talked about the streets that you would be in charge of, so that would include like Ventura Boulevard or Van Nuys Boulevard, and also the little streets in front of people's homes, or
Correct.
Where there's not that much traffic, etc. Streets that end in cul-de-sacs. It doesn't matter where the street goes. If it's a street within the city, then it's your responsibility. It falls within your department when it comes to traffic. Again, not when it comes to paving the street,
Correct.
and not when it comes to filling potholes.
Correct.
Okay?
That's street services.
But let me give you an example of something that just came to my attention, a question when I was in Sun Valley talking to some junior high students, and one student asked me an excellent question. She said, my mom wants to know, how do we get our neighbor's house, the sidewalk paved? And this is where you come in, because it's so bad that the kids and people have to walk in the street to get to the other piece of sidewalk beyond that property. Now, the sidewalk, is that your responsibility within your department?
Not within our department. That
Okay.
is still street services. However,
when that person walks on your street, and that has to do with traffic and safety, then that somehow you may have something to do with.
that's correct. And with a great partnership with my other life, the Department of Public Works and the Board of Public Works, and my great partners there with Bill Robertson, in those issues where there is a linkage between us, there's always a way that we can talk to each other. And they have great plans at street services for how we accomplish these, and then linking with us on the street part of it, then we can find a great linkage. And we have done a number of these together within the Department of Street Services, the Bureau of Street Services, and the Department of Transportation. So we can link together as two departments to solve the problem.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a delicate question. In dealing with other departments and trying to solve problems interdepartmental where more than one department has to come to the table, do you ever have disagreements?
We have disagreements, but more importantly...
But hold on. That's okay. That happens. But most of the time, what tends to be the root of the disagreement? Is it the fact that we don't have the right engineers or minds to come together on the solution? Or it tends to be the fact that we don't have enough dollars in order to satisfy the ultimate solution that all of our engineers and good minds like yourself and other department heads agree that we should be able to do? Isn't it usually the money limitation that causes us to back up and figure out alternative ways to solve problems rather than the ideal way to solve the problem?
Yes, we're all challenged by the amount of funding and resources that we have.
And that tends to be the main root of us having to back off from a solution that we'd love to attack, right?
Yes.
The problem
The
with.
ultimate solution, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Your answers certainly alluded to and actually pointed out how well suited you are to work for the city in this capacity and work with all the other departments and agencies, et cetera, to make the best of what we have to do when it comes to the city of LA. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, colleagues, for a great discussion. This was never going to be a quick confirmation, and not because we're not huge Rita Robinson fans, because we are, but because this is probably the number one issue for this body and for this city that obviously affects the most people. I appreciate the time that we spent talking before this meeting about some of the vision that you have, some of the priorities that we have. But for the people that are watching, let me ask you a couple questions. What neighborhood in Los Angeles do you think is doing better than others in terms of traffic management and transportation options?
Is this a trick question?
There's no. I'm not leading you any place.
Am I supposed to say Hollywood,
Not at all.
Sun
No.
Valley, and all of
You can be any place in this city. It's more about the dream. You said the dream, and so help us see the dream through your eyes a little bit. Where's a place that's doing well or better? I don't want to say great because no place is great in the city, but and then I'm going to ask you the converse, a place that we haven't been able to do well. And it's no reflection on any of us, whether it's done well or whether it's done poorly right now. I'm talking about years and decades, probably, of problems that have built up, sometimes beyond our control. But tell us a good neighborhood and a place where you think that the struggles are probably the highest.
I don't know that I'm equipped to really answer that question. I'm kind of stumped by that. Maybe I had to get John up here to help me since he has a lot more experience in each of the areas. I believe that every neighborhood I've talked to so far, and there have been quite a few, and chambers that I've talked to, have a willingness to try to work with us to make changes and improvements in their area. But I think that they also have a lot of fear for whatever the change is may impact them more. So if you can ask me that question a little later from now, I might be able to answer it. But I don't think I can answer it today because I think all the neighborhoods are trying desperately as they try to reach out to me to tell me that they want our help and they also want us to listen to them. And so I've been kind of soaking it up like a sponge, so I can't really wring myself out and tell you the real answer to that question.
Let me do this then. Let's get abstract. Let's call a new neighborhood in Los Angeles called Utopia Village. How does Utopia Village work in terms of well-functioning transportation and transit options and traffic management? What does that look like to Rita Robinson?
I think Utopia Village then begins to open up the door to communication and bring everybody in the room. I think that we have to start with a dialogue with each other of bringing in new ideas, very much like we've done with Solid Resources, is to ask everybody to come in the door, bring your ideas, bring your frustrations. Let's talk about what it is that we'd like to do and then how we can do it. Not do anything, but to be able to accomplish. And that means all of our partners with regard to planning, land use, our new development coming into the area, or any of the other issues with regard to transit. So I don't think it can only be about cars. It can't only be about bicycles. It can be about all of those things coexisting and whatever outside of Utopia Village that comes into Utopia Village, because I think that that's also a dialogue that has begun, that wherever you have employment centers, what has to come through that area of Utopia Village to get to where the jobs are. So you have a bigger economic issue there. So I think that there are probably places in the city that want to try to get it right. I think Playa Vista was one of those places that tried to get it right with regard to linking jobs, transit, and housing together. I think we're trying to do some of those things in some of the transit corridors that we're doing along Hollywood Boulevard and some of the other areas of the city where we are looking at linking things with housing and transit in one area. And I think in a number of areas of the city we've gotten there.
I appreciate that, and one of the things we talked about on the one day that we had just on the environment, or 2 days that we had just on the environment here last month, was some sort of measure on the jobs housing balance. How can we actually look at a neighborhood and see what that deficiency is? Is it 5 times more jobs than housing of people that work in those jobs? Is it vice versa? Is it mostly residential community with very few jobs there? And using that measure, which I've asked the planning department to develop, I think our transportation planning unit too should be working closely with them, because that will help us look on a map and see, 1 million people go to the west side in the morning, and only, of those workers, 50,000 of them live on the west side, or whatever it is. But that gets us to a place where we can begin to look at managing that as well. I know the clock was running, and I wanted time to be held, so let me take another minute to ask you a couple other questions.
I'm glad to hear you talk about pedestrians and bikers. That's very important, I think, for some of our urban villages. Our ability to finish off the bikeway to downtown from the San Fernando Valley along the Los Angeles River. We have taken a couple kind of great walkabouts, we've called them, in Hollywood and Glassell Park with Mr. Reyes and Mr. Weezar's staffs and the council members themselves, looking at everything from sidewalks and what building walls look like as opposed to, cafes with sidewalk dining, etc. What can we do more aggressively to make this a pedestrian-friendly city, and what do you hope to implement as general manager?
Well, my hope is that we first of all just realize that we acknowledge the fact that there are pedestrians and bikers in the city, that somehow gets eclipsed by everything else that we talk about. And then we make safety a great part of whatever we've developed, so that we make sure that those individuals are safe as they cross streets, as they walk on our streets day to day. And so that will be an intricate part of plans as we look at new development and everything else, is that pedestrians and other modes of transportation that, get us out of our cars and certainly make us healthier, because that's something we really like to focus on as well, will be a part of plans as we move forward. So that I've also encouraged the staff with looking at things like scrambled crosswalks to help people walk across the street easier, smart crosswalks where we have the timing device where people know how much time they have before they get a street. And last week, even a driver told me how much he appreciated those smart crosswalks, because it helped him understand how much time he would really have with regard to entering an intersection and not speeding. Those kinds of things all help all of our communities do better, our drivers and our walkers.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you to your family and friends who have helped raise and support an extraordinary leader here in the city of Los Angeles. You absolutely have my support. I appreciate what Mr. Weezar said about the Dash Bus and our efforts not only in Silver Lake but in Glassell Park and Elysian Valley. That has to be one of the highest priorities, to get transit working, as the connectors and getting people out of the car, not for their trips to work necessarily, but it's those other errand trips that we really want to see. And working on the parking district and parking structures in Hollywood, I see it as really high priorities for the city as well. So thank you. You have my fullest support, and congratulations. And thank you to Mayor Villaraigosa for making such a great choice.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Alarcon.
Yes, Rita, I'm wondering if all your family members think you're crazy for wanting to take this job after all these questions. But I, too, want to lend my congratulations to you. We've known each other for a long, long time. And I know that it's good to see somebody come up through the ranks and have a perspective, know where all the dead bodies are, but also know where the opportunities have been laying dormant that should be dusted off and move forward aggressively. One of the biggest concerns, and I raise it really for the public's understanding more than relative to my decision about supporting your nomination as general manager, and that is the difficulty that our Department of Transportation has in assessing where the political winds are going to go in terms of supporting specific projects. And what the public largely doesn't know, and they think DOT ought to fix it, is that the vast majority of dollars that we have in our pool for transportation are either county, state, or federal. And our city Department of Transportation has a relatively small pot to disseminate, and that is in coordination with the other entities as well. So one of the greatest challenges that any general manager of our Department of Transportation will have is to be able to anticipate where the legislative opportunities are, to be able to be in a position to have our projects ready to go for proposals to get funded by that level, and to also have impact on that legislative agenda. I would like to see our general manager be much more aggressive in impacting the legislative direction that we take in prioritizing our efforts to get dollars from MTA, from the state of California, and from the federal government. I think we've been doing pretty good, actually, catch as catch can for over the last several years, largely because the leaders in those jurisdictions have been very helpful, particularly at the state level. But as we move forward, as we transition, perhaps, I hope we transition at the federal level in the next 2 years, I hope that we are aligned and ready to go with proposals that have been ignored by a federal government that only gives us about 78 cents for every dollar we give it. And so I hope that you will be a vanguard in helping us on the legislative direction. And I would like to hear your comments about the difference between dollars that we have internally and dollars we get externally.
Well, thank you, Councilman Rallick. It's an excellent question, because you're absolutely right that our amount of money is very limited compared to what we receive from both the state and the federal level. And I've already been in conversations with Jim Sealing in Washington regarding some of the legislative agendas that's coming up. And as you're aware, under this administration, there's very little coming toward California, but he's keeping us abreast of what could be as part of what we should be going and delegating for and lobbying for at Washington. But also we have more opportunity at the state level with regard to funding. As you know, we received the $150 million for ATSAC to improve our synchronization process and to improve that process and make it better. But we certainly agree with you that our aggressiveness in having projects ready to go, projects that we can already know that the direction of how the country is going or how the funding level are going, and being able to have, I would say, individuals that can give us that information, moles basically, that can give us information on how the temperature is, that our projects should definitely be in line with those. And that's what I mean by rebuilding our infrastructure and reinvesting in the department to make sure that we have staff that are available to be able to put those projects together, have them ready to go, very much like we learned in the housing department, because once we really got our act together in housing and began putting together projects that were ready to go, we started getting more of those dollars at the legislative level. And we will be looking for assistance from many of you who have had experience at the legislature level to give us some guidance and direction in those issues. So the department's posed and ready to go in that direction, and we would appreciate your support in that as well.
Good job.
Mr. Levant.
I just wanted to say, too, one other team that's so important, Ali Madabi and Tommy Plummer, and I want to say Aram, and also Mr. Rodriguez. All of them do a wonderful job. And just this Sunday, we had a half marathon that ran 6 miles through Griffith Park, and the rest of the 7 through the Hyperion Bridge, through Silver Lake, through Mr. Garcetti, Mr. Reyes' district, and finishing Ms. Perry's district. It was wonderful. But it doesn't happen unless you have those people there. And that's an important component for Los Angeles. It doesn't happen when there's 90,000 people, and we hope there's 90,000 people again at 39th and Figueroa at Many Fall Day next fall in the Coliseum. It doesn't happen when without those people out there on the special events, the marathon and the Hollywood Parade and all the things that you do. I just wanted to say that's an important component, because you're a great part of the solution to the Department of Transportation. I thank you, Madam President.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vajan. I appreciate you bringing that up, because we will be discussing special events and the impact of those funds on our budget and the impact of that staffing that has to be safe and has to engineer that function in order to get the job done. They do an incredible job.
Let me just ask a question on that. Let's say we do special events for the Hollywood Bowl, which are county parking lots, and they charge $15 to park or something. Should we say to them the next time they raise their fee, throw in an increment charge so that you could reimburse that? I think for things like that, that should be done. And I know this half marathon paid for everything. Does the big marathon pay for everything?
No.
No. So I think everybody should pay, but the half marathon did. So I think
that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the drain on our budget that, and on the general fund that some of these events cause. And we understand the measure that must be balanced, but we'd like to come to you with some ideas on how we think that we can reinvest ourselves and make sure that our staff is funded properly, that we have the expenses there, and that we are not operating in the red. Certainly the staff is working in that direction.
They're great, all of them. Tom and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levant. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you. And just to close, I know it's been a good hour now, Rita. Not too much of the hot seat, but I think you've clearly heard from our colleagues everything from, as mentioned, speed humps to the planning issues of cumulative traffic which I know is a big issue for me, from the traffic counts and how we look at EIRs, and to be able to let the community know that there is that accountability, and to look at, as a question Mr. Weisar asked, which is on the DASH and Prop A and C, which I know we have coming for our committee in the next couple of weeks, and how we leverage those dollars, which we have not, I don't think, effectively done in the past. It's an ongoing source of revenue, an expected source of revenue that we have not used, I think, to its fullest potential, and looking at some financial kinds of ways we can do that. So I just wanted to close and say thank you, Rita. Thank you to your family and friends that are here today. Know that all of us are by your side, helping you along the way, and we'll be counting on you on this issue of transportation. And thank you very much for your willingness to serve. And ask Madam President for an aye vote.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gruhl. Mr. Clerk, if you would please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Madam, Mr. Clerk, next item, please.
Item 8 was being held on the desk, and a substitute ordinance has been circulated, and the city attorney's office is recommending that the original ordinance be withdrawn.
Okay, and I believe Mr. Zine and Mr. Parks need to recuse themselves from this matter. Mr. Zine? You need to recuse yourself from item 8, as does Mr. Parker.
I will be recusing myself from this matter due to a benefit from this particular motion.
Mr. Parks is not in the chamber, and he has recused himself as well. I have to make an amendment. Okay.
Substitute order.
Okay, I can't. All right, I believe the clerk has made a request that the substitute ordinance on item 8 be moved, and I have the authority to be able to do that from the chair. Is that correct? Okay. So I move the substitute motion on item number 8, and that has been seconded by Mr. Weston.
And Madam President, for the record, there's actually no vote on this item today. It is only presented. It is actually held over till January 8th.
All right, thank you. So ordered. All right. Now, what is our next item?
Madam President, we've been advised by the city attorney to take a vote on that.
All right, so with that, would you then open the roll? Open the roll on that item. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item 15 was called special by Councilmember Alarcon.
Mr. Alarcon.
We just want to add the item.
What?
This is the one.
We're ready to move it?
No, ready to vote on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the item we're ready on. We're fine to vote on this item, yeah.
All right, great. You're ready to vote. No, nobody in the queue, so that'll be open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Item 17 called special by Councilmember Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President. Do we have cards on this item from the community? Madam President, if we could open a public hearing on this issue, and I'll be happy to talk after it. It's a contentious issue about a fence in my district and some of the concerns about it. If we could let the public hearing happen, I'll be happy to talk more about it afterwards.
All right, and if I would, I'd like to remind all members who are present that this is a fair hearing matter, quasi-judicial, and I would ask that you all please take your seats. Please take your seats immediately, and we only have 2 speakers on this item. This will be Judith Esposito. I'm sorry, 3 speakers. Judith Esposito, Pamela Harper, and Jed Parker. If you would please line up at the podium.
don't know if they... I'd like to submit this.
Please proceed.
Okay. My name is Pamela Harbour, 2330 McKinley Avenue. On August of 06, on either side of one of the Bouffards' homes, 2 illegal over-in-height, 8-foot-tall walls were built without permits. Mr. Bouffard clearly stated on February 21st on public record that he felt compelled to build his 6-foot with 7-foot post vinyl fence, 80-foot wide, it's 2 lot widths, because of the 2 illegal walls on either side of his property. This plastic wall stands at the sidewalk with absolutely no setback whatsoever. It's right across the street from me. On December 6th, 07, the zoning administrator denied keeping the 80-foot-long white vinyl fence, but approved a 3-foot 6-inch fence allowing taller hedges with spaces in between. The fence was denied, most likely because of all the letters from neighbors objecting to the looks of the plastic fence. Then, February 21st of 07, the West LA Planning Commission denied the entire over-in-height plastic fence, and whatever the modification would be. Because of the neighboring huge walls had not come down yet, Ms. Bouffard came up with using, and in my opinion, misusing or abusing, an RAO to get around the city's denial. In this RAO, Ms. Bouffard and the city seemed to be diagnosing Ms. Bouffard with a medical disability, not her therapist. The therapist only mentions the word anxiety and depression, and I've passed out the first 11 pages. I have some highlighted things that I'd like you just to look at. They're the medical letters. The word disability is not only used by Ms. Bouffard herself and the zoning administrator who wrote the RAO. There has been a grave mistake here. The RAO...
Ma'am, just for 1 minute. Mr. Rosendahl?
Yes, I'd like to give her more time, another minute if we could, to finish it. And we'll give the opposite side 3 minutes as well.
There'll be 10 minutes on each side then.
Oh, not 10 minutes.
Well, she said 3 minutes, and there's 3 speakers there on this side. You're going to add 1 more minute, so...
Just 1 sentence left. Thank you.
Remember, the doctor and the therapist never use the word disability. Anyone can get a note from their doctor saying that they have anxiety and depression necessitating an illegal, ugly wall. The case will surely open the floodgates for such abuses. I just wanted you to look at what I have to look at
Thank you
for the
very
rest of my
much.
life.
Okay, next speaker.
My name is Judith Esposito, 2341 Boone Avenue, Venice. Our neighborhood is called the Silver Triangle. It is one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in Los Angeles. The teardowns start at $1 million. The RAO Ms. Bouffard has filed is a distortion of the intent of what an RAO is meant to address. For example, a ramp for the disabled, but not an illegal fence that ruins the look of our precious neighborhood. It is not the neighborhood's responsibility to be burdened by this. Ms. Bouffard is gainfully employed as a teacher, which of course requires tremendous competence. Can a full-time teacher be mentally disabled? I feel this anxiety claim is utter nonsense, and the neighborhood should never be made to suffer such an injustice. The city has made a mistake by allowing this RAO to pass. RAO is not intended for such a weak and feeble excuse. This is clearly an abuse of the intent of the RAO, and out dishonest, and is certainly not reasonable.
Next speaker.
Hello, thank you. My name's Jed Pauker. I live at 824 Amoroso in Venice, and I work on the Venice Neighborhood Council on the Land Use Planning Committee for the last year. We've listened to a variety of fence cases, so I'm pretty familiar with the whole issue and this instant issue also. I will skip to the chase in my letter in the interest of time, because this extremely contentious issue is at best annoying for most people, but it keeps repeating in its annoyance over time. What I'm going to recommend today is that we reconsider the Plum decision, the Plum recommendation, and implement an immediate task force for the life of 90 to 180 days. The task force should be comprised of health practitioners, at least one professional mediator, city employed or otherwise, and at least one community representative from the neighborhood council, either from the neighborhoods committee or from the outreach committee. This task force will apply a policy, define and apply a policy that will apply to this case and all cases moving forward. That said, you have a week yet to consider this case. It's not due for a vote until December 11th, so you can wait until December 11th to do that. Now, the alternative to doing this is a potential stream of letters from aggrieved stakeholders, along with a stream of future such cases, with their own letters from their own health professionals claiming the same disability and need for a fence. We need to have a way to validate and verify this one and a policy for using that validation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on the opposing side is Sheila Buffard.
Good morning, members of the City Council. My name is Sheila Buffard. I live at 2329 McKinley Avenue in Venice. I'm the recipient of the reasonable accommodation in this case. I'm here to ask the Council to adopt the staff recommendations in this case for the Council action. The staff recommendations have been to resolve to deny the appeal filed by Pamela Harbour. They have stated no new information in this case, as have gone through their many appeals. No new information. And also I would like to state that I accept and I gladly comply with the conditions of the approval and the staff recommendations that include, and I'm quoting from the recommendations, allowing vegetation to crawl up the fence and thus cover it. 5-gallon plants in the forms of vines will be planted 5 feet apart to allow for the complete green coverage of the fence. And I'm happy to do that. I'll comply with these conditions, and I again ask you that you please put a stop to this and adopt the staff recommendations. And at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me, or if you'd like me to address any of the things that Ms. Harbour has raised, although they have been addressed at every other meeting. They have been addressed in the RAO, which has been approved, and in all the appeals. I'd like to save any balance of my time if I have for, no. Any questions you have for me?
Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you. Could we have staff come up, please, and take us through this issue? You can sit down. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Gary Boer, Associate Zoning Administrator, Office of Zoning Administration. The municipal code has provisions for exceptions to the code for individuals with a disability protected by the American Disabilities Act. And it was found that adequate documentation had been provided consistent with ADA requirements as far as establishment of a disability. And the amendment that has been provided by the council office regarding the vines is consistent with the original request, but also to be sensitive to the neighborhood needs.
Mike LeGrand, Chief Zone Administrator, Department of City Planning. I couldn't hear your question, Councilman.
Would you want to add anything to this? to what he just said?
No, I feel Mr. Brewer covered it adequately. I feel that the conditions of approval that your office has worked with our office on provides for a better design of the fence, and this is a unique situation under this ordinance where we're looking at the individual and the circumstances of their disability rather than the hardship findings that normally would have to be made to deviate from the zoning code. So it is a very unique, I don't think the council has seen many of these applications, and so it takes a special consideration under the state law as well as the city's enabling legislation.
Do you want to add something to this as well?
For the record, Sharon Cedar of Cardenas, City Attorney's Office. I think Mr. LeGrand and Mr. Boer adequately stated the city's codes and position.
So in other words, the codes and the laws allow this to happen, and this is by the book, and this is why it's approved.
Yes, Councilman. The council a couple of years ago amended the code to add in this procedure for granting reasonable accommodations, and this procedure was what was utilized in this case. The applicant applied for it, and the department made the appropriate findings in order to grant this, and it's now before you.
The amendments, colleagues, that my staff worked with them on are as follows. Added condition. 5-gallon vines shall be planted 5 feet apart in front of the fence and grown until there is complete green coverage of the fence, all to the satisfaction of the zoning administrator in consultation with the council office. Added to findings number 4. The fence height in Los Angeles Municipal Code section 12.21-C 1G in the R1-10 zone are designated to maintain the aesthetic character of a neighborhood in addition to maintaining a sense of openness on the pedestrian scale. Because of the allowance of such an overheight fence at 2329 South McKinley Avenue, in order to keep with the intent of the code, the owner shall plant and maintain vegetation along the side of the fence fronting the street. This vegetation shall be planted in the form of green vines. The fence shall be modified to allow the vines to crawl up the fence and thus cover it completely. 5-gallon plants in the form of vines shall be planted 5 feet apart to allow the complete green coverage of the fence. In accordance with the condition, 6 of the determining letters dated December 12, 2007, quote, pursuant of section 12.22-A 27F of the Los Angeles Municipal Code, quote, the authorization of an over-in-height fence is only for reasonable accommodation to an individual with disability and shall not run with the land. Any modification to the subject fence shall require additional review and sign-off from the Department of City Planning. That quotes that I read kind of hard means that it just goes with the individual in this issue and is not a permanent fence. Am I right on that?
For the record again, Sharon Cedar of Cardenas, City Attorney's Office. Yes, Councilman, that is correct. That if that individual moved out of the property or sold the property, then the fence would come down.
And this law that is for people with disabilities came through the council in a process a couple of years ago?
Yes, I happen to have my code with me, and the ordinance that added this was effective March 18th, 06.
March 18th, 06. And it was in compliance with the state law?
State and federal law. We had been contacted by a number of groups, and the ordinance was drafted in conjunction with the planning department and debated by the city council and then adopted.
Colleagues, it's a tough one. I mean, this whole fence issue is a tough one. We all are dealing with a very tough ordinance. When did that ordinance come in place, the original one? About the height?
Do you know?
The fence ordinance?
The fence.
Gary Boer, Zoning Administration. The fence ordinance, as far as exceeding the height of 3 feet 6 inches within the front yard setback area, has been in place probably since before I've been working for the city, and I've been here 34 years. It's been around a long time.
And we all know the issues of that, and we could go into a huge discussion about the situation we're in right now in our city. But this is a modification of a law that does meet the legal ramifications. So on this moment, I ask us to support the exception made by the Disability Act. Thank you.
Mr. Alarcon.
I love city council work. The question is not whether or not the person sufficiently has documented a disability that meets the standard as indicated in the ordinance. That is clear. If we accept that, the question to me is whether or not we think the accommodation is reasonable. I don't think it is. And it seems to me that there's a lot of ways to construct a fence or have the intended purpose to allow for this person to have the necessary blockage without undermining the other ordinance. And I'm just curious, were other alternatives? I mean, there's no federal requirement that this is the reasonable accommodation we must make. Was there any were there any other alternatives, perhaps proposed by the community members, that would have met the standard and been able, where we could have defined it as a reasonable accommodation? For example, where we keep the height standard of the fence, but above it we provide some other kind of shield that would be less offensive to the community. Were there any other things that contemplated?
Sharon Cedar Cardenas against City Attorney's Office. In this instance, she did submit a letter from her doctor indicating that an over-in-height fence was a reasonable accommodation.
But it's not the only reasonable accommodation under state and federal law.
The problem is that once her doctor has said that it's a reasonable accommodation, I don't know that the city has the expertise to start defining what is a better reasonable accommodation. I think what we can do is we can look at the land use impacts.
On the other community members' rights to have consistency with the general plan, for example. Don't other community members have the right to that?
I think we can look at the land use impacts and impose conditions to mitigate some of those land use impacts. But federal and state law says that we need to be able to grant accommodations to people so that there are not barriers to them being able
I understand that
to live in their
completely.
houses.
The question is whether or not the federal and state government laws require us to allow a doctor to define that reasonable accommodation. And I don't believe it does. I don't believe it does. Tell me what section of the law requires us to listen to a doctor in terms of a planning decision. I mean, I get the whole notion of a reasonable accommodation, but I don't think we are controlled by a doctor saying that it has to be this kind of fence. Where in the law does it say that? And I would ask that we continue this matter until I get an answer.
Gary Boer, Associate Zoning Administrator, Office of Zoning Administration. As planners, we work within the provisions of the code that is established by ordinance regarding fences. There's also the issues as far as policy per the general plan. Many of the general plans are currently undergoing revision. Unfortunately, I believe there is only one of the community plans currently has any provisions related to fences within the front yard setback areas. So I'm just presenting this as background that perhaps in order to provide better guidelines as to the range.
Why do we need guidelines? We have a specific case. The question is whether we can comply with federal law and define the reasonable accommodation differently to meet the federal and state standard, at the same time trying to do everything we can to protect the community with regard to our general and community plans. Now, the question was specific. Is there anything in federal or state law that prohibits us from providing a different reasonable accommodation?
Michael LeGrand, Department of City Planning. I think you're right on point, Councilman. I think there could be alternatives that could be utilized to look at to see if there is a different accommodation that can be made. In this case, they asked for the fence. We had medical documentation supporting the fence, and there weren't alternatives raised at the hearing that would have been different than rather than screening of the fence like you hear about vines. But I think your point is right on, that there has to be a more creative look at these so that we find ways in which to meet both objectives for the medical field as well as for the general community. So your point is well taken.
Did you have a different take on that?
Again, Sharon Sierra of Cardenas, I think the issue is what is the city's expertise in terms of dealing with medical conditions, because these are medical conditions. The planning department does not have doctors on staff. We have a doctor saying that for this particular medical condition, that an over-and-height fence is an accommodation that's needed in order to allow this person to have the same enjoyment and use and occupancy of their property.
So you're suggesting that the standard in the law of reasonable can be superseded by an expert, a doctor in this case, practitioner, as opposed to reasonable minds that might decide a different accommodation?
Yes, I do believe that we do not have the expertise to go against a doctor's opinion as to what is necessary.
We're screwing up a community and we can't come up with the expertise to come up with a better solution? I think we shouldn't stick our heads in the sand. I can't vote for this. I don't think it's a reasonable accommodation. I think it's messing up the community. And we need to work harder to protect the interests of the disabled person in this case who does need to be protected. At the same time, try to do a better job of accommodating the general and community plans. How much time do we have on this matter? Is today the last day?
Councilmember, December 11th is the time limit.
And look, this is the first time, right? This is the first time we really had a major situation related to this ordinance, right?
Correct.
Am I wrong?
This is the first time, I believe, once
So
the appeal.
let's live and learn. I mean, but I think if we force this thing today, we're not working hard enough to try and find a reasonable accommodation on this side and a reasonable accommodation on this side. And I think that's our job, not to just assume that this doctor can cram a bad solution into our community. I don't believe that's the case, and I challenge. I would like to know what federal law mandates that this doctor can do this. So I would urge Mr. Rosendahl to continue this matter. I will vote against it if we proceed it today, but I urge you to continue this matter and find a more reasonable accommodation for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Mr. Cardenas?
This letter from this doctor, I'm assuming it's an MD or is it psychologist?
The documentation, there was two different documentations. One was from an MD.
My time.
I'm sorry, Gary Boer, zoning administrator. One was from an MD, and the other one was from, I believe, was a marriage and family counseling therapist, something like that.
Okay. But the bottom line is, we're talking about a disability issue. And the fact of the matter is federal, state laws, etc., dictate to us at the local government level that we need to respect the fact that there are disability issues, and we have to take those things into account sometimes when it comes to our planning decisions?
That is correct. Gary.
That is correct. Okay. So when we get a letter from a doctor on a specific issue like this, we have a responsibility to respect that letter, right? Doesn't mean we agree with it or not, but we have to respect the letter, take it into account. Is that correct?
Gary Boer again. Yes, we need to. We must take it seriously as far as how we need to provide that reasonable accommodation. We were in consultation with the city attorney's office. Because of the newness of the application, yes, there are probably bugs that we need to work out as far as procedures, policies, application forms to make sure that we have all the documentation and that we maybe consider whatever alternatives. But this was the only fence that was provided to us, and there was documentation from the appropriate medical professionals.
Okay, so basically, whether we have a system that is lacking alternative venues and ways to vet this out to come to this decision point, whether or not that's the case, in this particular case, the applicant actually provided sufficient information for us to consider whether or not we should grant this fence or this barrier.
Gary Boer again. Yes, they have provided the adequate documentation and the information that was needed in order to make the findings to grant the reasonable accommodation.
And the applicant didn't come forward and say, I'm asking for an application for these various barriers. I'm asking for this one.
The applicant only asked for the fence as it is currently constructed.
Okay. Is it within our authority or responsibility to go ahead when an application like this comes forward to tell the applicant to please come back with alternatives?
Perhaps that's where we could have done more work, but based on some initial advice from the city attorney.
But are we obligated to do so? Legally, are we obligated to do that? Are we obligated on an application like this to tell the person to please come back with alternatives? Are we obligated to do that?
It's the discretion of the decision maker, and it was unclear to us at the time as far as the range of options we had.
Okay. So, right now, are we in violation of the law based on where we're at today on this particular process?
We are not in violation of the law.
So we feel as though we followed the law so far?
Yes.
Okay. Now, every time we try new things, are we putting ourselves in a position where we might be outside the law?
Councilman Michael LeGrand, Department of City Planning, you're correct. If we try and experiment with federal regulations, state regulations, as well as our local enabling ordinances, we do walk a fine line of being in violation of a law, especially with something like Disability Act and provisions such as this, where there are privacy issues.
Okay. Now, when it comes to this particular application, is this causing any, as far as you can tell, is it causing anything that causes any danger to the neighbors or to the neighborhood? As far as you can ascertain so far?
Michael LeGrand, Department of City Planning. The way the fence is designed, I don't feel is a safety hazard or danger with the setbacks in the current yards. It's more of an aesthetic issue. Many communities go through a process to get over and height fences approved within your district and all the council districts. And there's certain neighborhoods where those are welcomed. Other neighborhoods, it may change the character of the neighborhoods. There's more of a concern for it. So there's no safety issue in terms of the design of this fence. And the findings have been made in order to prove this reasonable accommodation.
So on the one hand, we have a property owner who came forward with an application and has brought forward a letter or letters from doctors or a doctor that actually is trying to give their opinion about how this would assist this individual when it comes to their medical condition.
Correct.
And it appears that as of right now, the only person who has a plea to the city right now, in this case, when it comes to medical issues or physical detriment or what have you, is the applicant. Is anybody else claiming that it's causing physical detriment to them because of this particular applicant's application?
No, my understanding was the appeals were based off aesthetics and perhaps, I'm not sure if visibility for the neighboring residences was an issue, but I don't believe they were based off safety concerns. Mr. Boer, if you have anything to add to that.
Can you clarify if you would, please?
Gary Boer, I'm not aware of any other visibility concerns that have been raised at this time. I was not party to the prior deliberations before another zoning administrator and the Area Planning Commission. The only issues I'm aware of are aesthetic by other property owners.
Okay. I feel for you, Mr. Rosendahl. This is one of those situations where people seem to be making their case or what have you. But the fact of the matter is we as local government, we are not gods, even though we have the planning authority, but we're also ruled by federal and state laws that don't allow us to act like gods or to say, you know what, I think this group yells louder, or I think this group has a great story to tell. It's not about stories. It's about the law. And the fact of the matter is, again, Mr. Rosendahl, I feel for you being in this situation. We're all in this situation now because we have to vote for it. But I do agree with you, Mr. Rosendahl. I'm ready to vote for this right now, and I will support it. Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Hey, I just have a couple of questions. So this is not a variance.
Gary Boer, Zoning Administration. This is not a variance. This is under...
How many times have these been used, this type of reasonable...
Our office is Michael LeGrand, Department of City Planning. Our office has seen about 4 applications of this since 2006.
How about beyond? That's 4 in a short period of time. What about, back to Calvin Hamilton times? How many?
The ordinance was adopted that allowed for this in 2006 by the city. So prior to this, you would have to go through the normal variance process you're used to in terms of a hardship.
Let me ask a question. What happens when they sell the property?
Then the Department of Building and Safety would be, if the fence didn't come down as part of the sale, the Department of Building and Safety could go out and cite them.
What do they put a covenant on the property? What do they put a covenant on the property? If this is something, you want the person to have the wall, right? But you want the person to have the wall, Mr. Rosendahl. Correct? Help me if you could here, because I'm worried that this is
All right,
going to be
Mr.
used.
Labange, we're going to hold your time if you want Mr. Rosendahl to answer you.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Labange, this conditions that we're putting in here as an amendment clearly say, and I will read it again, the authorization of an over in height fence is only for reasonable accommodations to an individual with disability and shall not run with the land. Meaning when she leaves that property, if she ever leaves it, the fence is down. It's not a permanent fence. That's why the plants will grow.
Because I've had fence problems in my career, both as a deputy and now as a council person, and it is very sensitive, and I could see other people who may be watching Channel 35 right now and saying, I may want to exercise this reasonable accommodation. There's only been 4, but all of a sudden, they first sold 4 Pink's hot dogs, now they sold 4 million. That's how it goes. Why don't we just ask, can we ask that there be a covenant that be recorded with the County of Los Angeles? Why can't we ask that?
Gary Boer, Zoning Administration, there are already those conditions in, as the councilman suggested. There is a condition that requires the standard covenant agreement. There is another condition which would be part of that covenant agreement that explicitly states that it only runs with the individual and not with the land.
I understand that, but I've seen that many times that it takes, someone, they sell the house based on the fact they have a overheight fence, and yet it wasn't legal in the first place. So to make sure that if that is a covenant, that's what I want to see, that's tied to the land. When they do the escrow,
it is a covenant. It is a covenant. A covenant that explicitly says that that fence runs with the individual, not
and the applicant is here. The applicant is here. And the applicant is here. They agree with the fence. They agree if you sell the house, move to Arizona, you take the fence down. You agree to take the fence down if you happen to leave the property. Yes? Want to come up here just to... Because I could see this being a problem, Mr. Rosendahl. I just want to make sure...
It's clear right here.
I understand that, but I'd love to see it from the...
Okay,
you're a man of democracy.
Excuse me. One person at a time. Mister, if you want to keep this on the desk, you guys can go and have a sidebar.
Right now. I just want to hear the applicant.
Well, hold on a second. We're still on Mr. Labange's time. Now, if you, Mr. City Attorney, if you can give me an opinion on this, so whether or not Mr. Labange can invite someone to the lectern to answer a question, is that appropriate?
They fully understand that, because I want to vote for
Mr.
Rosendahl based on your opinion.
Just waiting to get a determination from the City Attorney. Mr. Rosendahl, why don't you either press your button again, or we can hold this on the desk, and then Mr. Labange can just go to the side and have a sidebar, and then we'll proceed with the agenda, and then come back to you when you're ready. Because it's back and forth on each other's time.
I'm ready right now. It's clear in black
Well, somebody
and white.
needs to call to the question, then, and you're on Mr. Labange's time now.
Okay, I'll
Mr.
finish my
City
time.
Attorney, do we have an answer on?
Yeah, if, in order to allow optimum fairness with respect, if you can allow the applicant to go ahead and just respond to that query.
Right. So allow the applicant to respond. You understand that this agreement with the City of Los Angeles, if it's approved, that if you ever should leave the property, the fence would be required to be taken down to the legal limit, which is what, at that side yard or rear yard?
3.5 feet. in the
3.5 feet.
Yes, I've read and understand and will comply with the covenant.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. And I want to ask you another question. Thank you very much. That's real important. I want to ask another question for the zoning administrator. Do you subscribe to fountains and encouraging people to use fountains? Because I've read where noise and abatement can be dealt with based on water fountains. Have you ever heard that, Mr. Zoning Administrator?
Michael LeGrand, Department of City Planning. Yes, it's true that many people, for example, in Westchester, who may live near the airport, you could have fountains in order to help mitigate some noise elements.
Good. And the other day I was at a public park, and it was a beautiful day, and all these people were playing over here and playing over there and playing down there, and seniors were sitting down there, and I called the director over to congratulate her, and just then a citizen came up who was upset because there was too much noise from the park. And it's separate from this case here, but I think we have to be real sensitive on all these issues because there's public space, there's people who next to it. The quality of what a fence looks like, I mean, that should be, because you do require it on some of your cases that you say it has to be a certain style, whether it's cut, and I forget the stone you call it.
Slump stone.
Slump stone or cinder block stone or whatever, and graffiti proof and all that stuff. So you're requiring all that?
Correct. Those are standard conditions. In this case, it's not that type of a block wall, but there are aesthetic conditions to help address, to mitigate.
Help to address that.
Yes.
And you think this is the fair thing to do?
Correct. We support our decision.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rosendahl, you want to press your button again?
I just ask for an aye vote on this motion. All the processes have been used and all the issues have been done and the conditions have been put forward. So I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Clerk, please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
9 ayes, 1 no.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Madam President, I believe there's a request to take item 34 out of order, and an amending motion has been circulated on that.
All right, Mr. Parks is going to handle that item on behalf of Ms. Gruhl. So give him a second to get back to his seat. Fine.
Thank you, Madam President. On item 34 today, we have a report from the Transportation Committee and also a amending motion and then a thumbnail sketch. Basically what we have is the Commuter Express Line's RFP or contract is coming to a conclusion. There was an RFP process that we went forward on. The pricing came back such a significant increase from prior contracts that the Transportation Department decided not to go forward on the RFPs because they wanted to reevaluate, look at the system, look at the coverage, look at the routes that are being currently deployed. And so the best option was to give the existing vendor a month-to-month contract for 6 months for this review with the outside of 1 year for another RFP if that is necessary. The amending motion just corrected some language in the committee report, and I'd like to add just one verbal amendment that the city reserves the right to withhold payment for replacements if it is determined that the adequate preventive maintenance practices were not followed. I'm going to add that to the committee report, and I'd ask for an aye vote on the amending motion and the committee report and the verbal amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Clerk, if you would please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Item 22 is being held on the desk for a Transportation Committee report, and that now has been circulated.
All right. Are we ready to proceed on item 22? There's no speakers in the queue on that. Can you tell me who held it on the desk? Or who asked?
It was being held on the desk for the committee report that was circulated during the meeting.
All right, Wes. All right, so the report's been circulated, and there are no buttons pushed, so that I will ask you to open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Item 30, called special for cards from the public.
Our card, let's see, in the San Fernando Valley, Donna Pierman.
Okay. This is Donna Perriman. Since you wouldn't put a cap on your fee waivers, the public has to tell you not to spend money we don't really have. All fun and festive events, but zaps the city dry. The Fiesta of Our Lady of Guadalupe, 2,909, Walk of Fame, which already happened, and 1,195, 13th Annual Holiday Open House, 4,254, Community Christmas Party, 1,226, another Christmas Party Open House, 1,260, Annual Whale Festival, 1,260. Ooh, I love whales. Thank you for the Hanukkah Family Festival. By the way, Hanukkah is starting today, so happy Hanukkah. You have to have this Hanukkah thing with all the Christmas events, and then we have the Lincoln Heights Holiday Parade, 3,000. In the meantime, you put up trash fees, phone fees, or sales taxes too high. You kill the people with fees and kill them with kindness. Well, I'd rather have more money in my pocket. Don't we already pay enough money in property taxes and rents? So you can party on our dime. Our city employees get blasted so you can do fee waivers. And that's why the mayor wants you to curb them. Maybe you think we are like a credit card company with no interest rate. Bottom line, you spend too much. Don't do these fee waivers. For once, look at it and say, no more fee waivers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no additional cards for public comment. Mr. Clerk, what is the next item?
Council needs to take a vote on that item.
Okay, would you open the roll? Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Item 33, called special for cards from the public.
All right, our speaker on that is Kathleen Rezzo.
Today, the council is being asked to approve the final map for the Granada Hills High Water subdivision, item number 33E on your agenda. But there is a problem with this project. The residential zoning for this site expired in April of 2006, and last week the tentative tract map was set to expire as well. The developer, Ron Cooper, has asked for a hardship variance and wants you to approve the final map with a non-conforming land use designation on the zoning. But Ron Cooper is not a victim here and is certainly not worthy of a hardship variance. It was Ron Cooper who initiated the bankruptcy of one of the ownership entities, thereby halting and abandoning the project for several years. Ron Cooper's counsel will tell you that they couldn't process the final map before the zoning expired because the bankruptcy trustee placed a lis pendens on the site. What he won't tell you is that the trustee took that step to stop Cooper from fraudulently conveying portions of the site to others. It was Ron Cooper who failed to pay his property taxes for 4 years, who did not pay his subs and ended up with numerous mechanics liens, who refused to do weed abatement and brush clearance, and who turned off all the water to the site, leaving the hillside erosion control planting to die. The fact of the matter is that Ron Cooper had 6 of the strongest years in California real estate to build and sell 20 houses. Cooper wasted tremendous amounts of time in litigation he initiated and lost his entitlements as a result. Mr. Cooper wants your sympathy and special treatment to restore those entitlements. I'm asking you to require him to abide by the law and reprocess his map. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you very much for those comments. Mr. Yu from the city engineer, if you would please come forward. This is one of those projects I prefer to be on your side, and I wish I could be, because I would like to not see it built, quite frankly, and I do not believe Mr. Cooper has been the best of possible builders in the city of LA. I agree with you. Mr. Yu, this is kind of a catch-22 situation, isn't it? The city attorney has opined that we have to process this. Is that correct?
Edmund Yu from Public Works Engineering. Yes, I have a discussion with City Attorney's Office, and basically looking at the way the conditions were imposed and the sign-off on the track map conditions, is the opinion of City Attorney that this map should go forward at this time for approval.
Okay. As I said, I would prefer not to have this project if the project approved before I was elected, but nonetheless, the city attorney has said we must process, it must go forward. I don't think we have a choice in the matter, and ask we move the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. No further speakers in the queue. Mr. Clerk, if you would open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Items 35 and 36 were being held on the desk for substitute motions, and those have now been circulated.
All right, this item is up before us now. No speakers in the queue on this as well. So if you would again, open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Item 37 was called special for cards from the public.
Again to the Valley, Donna Pearman, and then back to City Hall after that with Mr. Arnold Sachs.
Okay, thank you. I'm Donna Perriman. I hope you're okay, Miss Perry, with your mouse. Anyway, I hope Rita Robinson can give us more commuter expresses and earlier 573 to Century City and bring our 12 o'clock bus back. Anyway, I know you will rubber stamp it, but I'm against spending all the money on these gold line. In the meantime, they take the money from our local lines, especially the 720 going on Wilshire Boulevard from L.A. to Santa Monica. Bad enough the 920 only half full runs along with steel buses from our 720, which is jam-packed with people. I am late to work because of it. Buses going to Westwood is limited, so I have to be late. I either have to be really early or late. And the line 7061 and commuter expresses only come in certain times. But I know you're going to throw away the money on the gold line, but our earthquake will probably make it fall apart. See, it's easier to go to Santa Clarita to Westwood and go all around Westwood. So shame on you with the gold line. Don't pass it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Arnold Sachs.
Yes, good morning, City Council. Thank you. Very quickly, on Friday last week, I believe it was the 30th, I addressed City Council regarding the MTA board meeting and the request that they made for funding for the Expo line and the Alameda corridor that totaled $250 million. And I was amazed at the MTA board meeting that there wasn't really any request for funding for the East Side Extension, and basically asked at that board meeting why there was cost increases associated with the Expo line, but none associated really with the East Side Extension. Now, on this item, it seems that they're getting money from the city to do their work, $106,000, which is not necessarily that much, but how much money has the city paid for work done regarding the East Side Extension? The cost of the East Side Extension was approximately $900 million. Does that price tag include work done or delegated to the City of LA? Also at the MTA board meeting, there was an item on the agenda requesting money for a delay due to the 2nd Street Bridge widening, which was supposedly work that is associated to be done by the City of LA. What is the status on the bridge widening? How much will it cost in delay of construction? And is the city on the hook for the delay? And is that also included in the cost of the MTA East Side Extension? And if those aren't included in the cost for the East Side Extension, that's why there's no cost overruns for MTA, because the city's footing the bill. And I'd like to point out that the MTA is requesting to terminate the fare reimbursement agreement with the city of Los Angeles. Taking from the left hand, not knowing what the right hand is doing. Great work, City Council.
Thank you very much. There are no more cards. Mr. Clerk, would you please open the roll? Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Motions are posted and referred.
That clears the desk.
All right, members, are there any announcements today? Any announcements? All right, would you please rise for any adjourning motions? Does anyone have any adjourning motions today? Okay. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Madam President. It is with much sadness that I report to you that Roger Mason, the brother of Airport Commissioner Val Velasco, died unexpectedly Saturday morning of an apparent heart attack. He was 48 years old. Speaking with Val yesterday, she was just talking with him. He went upstairs and he passed away, just like that. He died at home with his mother, his brother Bob, his son Mike, age 12, and his stepson Jason, 24, all there. He was dead in 2 minutes. Roger was the first baby born in the city of Pico Rivera when it was incorporated in 1959. Roger grew up in Whittier, California, and was a graduate of California High School and Rio Hondo College. Roger worked as a successful real estate appraiser for the last 28 years, running his own company, Mason Appraisals, and later working for various other corporations. Everyone's initial reaction when they learned of his death was, "He was the nicest man I have ever known." He was passionate, caring, dedicated to his family and friends, and he loved sports and barbecuing. He is survived by his mother, Connie, his son, Michael, age 12, his stepson, Jason, age 24, his siblings, Val Velasco and Robert Mason, nephew, Frank Velasco, Jr., and brother-in-law, Frank Velasco, Sr. He will be greatly missed. He was the soul of the family, a really good person. The funeral is this Friday at 1 o'clock at Rose Hill Cemetery, Whittier, at the Sky Rose Chapel, and I intend to be there. May he rest in peace.
Mr. Rosendahl, if all members are interested, I think we should all sign on. Mr. Wesson?
Thank you, Madam President and members. I rise today to adjourn in the memory of Maxine McGinnis, who was a community leader, active in the block clubs, and she was the type of person that she had common sense, and you could talk to her, and she was just a great mother. In fact, when I was chief deputy to Councilman Nate Holden, we got a scholarship for her daughter, who we thought was this just promising young lady. I'm proud to say that she is now a very good attorney in the Los Angeles area, and whenever I would see Maxine, she would always be grateful that the councilman and I had helped her daughter get along. The funeral was today at, I think, 11 o'clock. She's survived by a host of relatives and friends, and she will be missed dearly. That's Maxine McGinnis.
All right, thank you. There are no more adjourning motions. And before, Mr. Lavange, do you have an adjourning motion?
Members, Laval Lunn, who many of you know, the great Department of Water and Power executive for many years past, at 84 years old. Born in Los Angeles, went to Franklin Avenue, Thomas Starr King, and John Marshall High School class in 1941. He attended Occidental College. He was a CB, served in the United States Seabees during World War II. Later continued his education at Caltech. Started with the Department of Water in 1947 and grew through the ranks to be the top man in the aqueduct system. He was loved by Water and Power. He retired from the department, as I said, after 42 years. He was very involved with his community. With me, he helped form the John Marshall High School Alumni Association. He also was very involved with the Water and Power Associates, and and very involved with the charter reform. He will be missed by many. He's survived by the great Ethel Patterson, who you know out at the airport, who was a great historian and then longest-serving employee, a great family. Laval Lund suffered from lymphoma the last 2 weeks of his life, and I got to visit him last week twice and give him some cheer. A wonderful Los Angeles employee of many years, Laval Lund, passed at the age of 84. May he rest in peace.
Thank you very much. And before we adjourn the meeting, just ask the clerk to move items 4, 5, and 6 forthwith. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.